Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this narration of the web series Humans Don't Make Good Familiars. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Book 2, Chapter 29. Suma's Point of View. I was stunned. Jake told me about the dream, or rather, the memory, he witnessed. It must have been like something out of a nightmare.
I do not know what to say, Jake. I did not realize Zachariah was capable of such violence.
It doesn't feel real, honestly. Everything I've seen and heard about him up till now, it doesn't match. Then again, he was a Viking warrior and was no stranger to killing. Jake was sitting on a log and I was perched beside him. We were not far from the castle's entrance.
I do not doubt you, or the dream itself, but I do agree with you. It simply does not make sense. Zachariah was Ambos's familiar. He could not have done something so horrible without his master's permission, and I doubt the hero mage who defeated the Chaos Dragon would have agreed to slaughter innocent civilians en masse.
I thought quietly for a moment, while Jake and I sat in silence.
Even if he was a Viking, it feels as if some important detail is missing.
Maybe, maybe not. It doesn't matter. It was a long time ago, right? Jake sounded somber. He did not lift his head as he spoke. What matters is, I never want to see that ever again. I'm never going to use magic like that. Not for anyone or anything.
Jake, do you remember anything else from the memory?
Jake was quiet for a moment. Yeah, I think he was using runes.
Why do you believe that?
Jake turned and looked at me. His eyes looked tired. He kept healing himself. He would allow himself to become incredibly injured, and then the pain would just vanish. I never saw how it happened, but I guess he was doing the same thing I do, using runes to make up for his weaknesses.
Are you sure?
I asked, confused. What Jake was saying could not have been possible. No, I guess there could have been some other way.
I think perhaps there was. At that time, rune scrying was not nearly advanced enough to heal a mage of Zachariah's caliber during combat, I explained.
Runes, as Jake knows them, were not developed until long after Zachariah's supposed death.
Jake, you summarized the events of the memory for me, but could you please explain in greater detail everything you saw?
Suma, I don't really want to think about it anymore, Jake said.
I know, Jake, but please. I feel as if we are missing something important.
No, Suma, I just can't, okay? Jake said. His voice was barely a whisper.
Okay, Jake, never mind,
I said after hearing his voice. I had not seen Jake like this in quite some time.
I think it would be a good idea if you talked to Dr. Maxwell again. Will you please?
Jake did not reply, but he did nod his head that he agreed. I sent him home and flew to the place that myself and the other members of the travel group were staying tonight. Jake's Point of View. I reappeared back in my mum's house, in the room I had been staying in whenever I asked Suma to send me back to England, because Suma was staying in another city at the moment. I'd been here for a few nights, rather than my room at the base. At the moment, I was laying flat on my bed, staring up at the ceiling. I opened my phone and scrolled through the contacts until I saw Dr. Maxwell's name. I pushed it and waited for her to answer.
Hello,
she said. Hey, Doc, it's Jake.
Hi, Jake. How are you? She asked.
I stayed quiet for a moment. I honestly didn't know how to respond.
Do you have any appointments available for today? Do you need to come in right now? She asked, concerned.
Yeah.
Okay, come anytime. I'll stay late and send Veronica home.
I thanked her and hung up, then drove to her office. It was about 5 in the evening at this point, and because it was winter, the sun was already starting to set as I pulled into the car park of her office. Walking in, I noticed most of the lights had already been turned off, and the receptionist was already gone. I walked to her office and knocked on the door.
Jake, she called out.
I opened the door. Yeah. Thanks for letting me come so late. Dr. Maxwell was sitting in a chair across from the couch, reading a magazine.
It's no problem. What's going on? She asked.
I sat on the couch. Suma suggested I come and see you.
I'm glad to hear that she's keeping your well-being in mind. Did something happen? She asked,
and put the magazine down. I sighed. Yeah, sort of. I spent a few minutes explaining what happened and the dream, and I even started talking about the problems with the detective. It was like as soon as I started talking about what was going on, everything just started pouring out of me all at once. When I finally finished, I felt better, lighter even. Wow, I'd nearly forgotten how good it feels to come and talk with you. Thank you, I said.
I'm always happy to listen, but If you don't mind, I do have some questions, Dr. Maxwell said. I nodded for her to go ahead. I'd like for you to tell me more about this dream. Are you sure it was a memory, and not just that, a dream? I know you said that, in the past, you've been worried about what will happen when you do eventually go to war, and how it might affect you.
Well, pretty sure that it was a memory, and not just my imagination. Over the last 2 years, I've had to get pretty good at telling the difference. But yeah, I guess I'm still worried about that.
Jake, it's okay not to fight. Not everyone has what it takes to be a soldier. I'm sure Suma would understand if you did ask to leave, she said.
I know she would, but I don't want to leave Suma alone. I can't.
Can't? Can you explain what you mean by that?
I don't know how to explain it. Maybe it's because I'm her familiar, and that's playing into it somehow. Or maybe it's just because we are friends, but the thought of leaving her behind, I just can't do it.
Dr. Maxwell nodded her head and wrote something down in a notebook that she had on the coffee table beside her chair.
Do I sound crazy? I asked.
No, Jake. That makes sense to me. She put the notebook back down.
Thank you again for letting me come so late, I said.
No problem. Besides, it's probably better to have these kinds of conversations alone, she smiled. Do you want to make an appointment for next week while you're here?
Sure, I said. And we set a time for another appointment, one in which she would go to Suma's world and talk with her too. After that, I drove home. Nearly 3 hours had passed since Suma sent me back to England, and night fell over an hour ago. Man, I whispered to myself while driving, I sure let time get away from me in there. Eventually, I arrived back home and noticed something was off. There was a grey sedan parked outside the neighbor's house. At first, I thought it was just that they had guests, but when I drove by, I saw someone in the passenger seat ducked down. I couldn't see into the car, but I could guess who it was. The detective again, I groaned. I thought about getting out of the car and confronting her, but realized that was a bad idea. Instead, I pulled into my mum's driveway, went inside, and called the cops. About a minute and a half later, I hung up with 999. The sedan drove away, and 3 minutes later the police arrived. They took my statement, asked a few questions, and even talked to the neighbors whose house the car was parked in front of. Apparently, a lady matching the detective's description and saying that she was a police officer told them that she was posted here for a few nights to watch out for someone who was breaking into houses in the area. The police then stationed a patrol car outside my house for the night in case she returned. After all was said and done, I called my lawyer, Robert, and told him what happened.
I'll take care of this, Jake. You made the right decision calling me, Robert said after I explained what happened.
She won't get away with blatant harassment like this. Trust me on that. End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 30. Jake's Point of View. Suma and I, as well as the Niema captain that travelled here with Suma, were waiting outside the council room to give our answer to the requests yesterday. None of us knew how they would react, so tensions were pretty high. On several occasions, I started imagining all the worst-case scenarios, and how, if it came to a fight, what I might do. But each time I reassured myself that wouldn't happen. In reality, I couldn't even be sure I was the one who was nervous. Lately, my mental connection to Suma was getting stronger, and so I could sense her feelings more easily, especially if they were strong ones. Most likely, I was feeling some combination of both of our anxieties, which really wasn't helping. A small blue Niema flew out and, without landing, said, "They are ready for you. Follow me." The other flew after her, and I kinda had to jog behind them to keep up. After settling into our places, them perched on poles and me standing beside Suma again, the council member who we had been interacting with so far spoke up. Have you reached a decision regarding our offer?" Suma was the one who answered.
"We have, and we cannot accept it. Our apologies."
"And may the council inquire as to why? If it is a simple matter, we should be able to make accommodations."
"We simply do not believe that we are, as of yet, ready to work with the council and the court mages. However, we will reconsider your offer in the future, if it is still available at the time." The council members' eyes all started glowing, and then suddenly stopped. What of your familiar sentinel? Do you agree with your master's decision?" I glanced over at Suma and the captain, who both looked shocked. Suma's feathers were even puffed slightly. "I do." All of their eyes started glowing again, and did not stop for at least a full minute. Not one sound was made in that time.
but eventually they did speak. "That is a shame. Our offer will remain open to you for the foreseeable future, and should you reconsider, please contact us and we will welcome you both."
Suma and the captain bowed deeply, and Suma said, "Thank you for your offer and your understanding." With that, we were dismissed and escorted back into the hallway. "Wait here a moment," the Niema who was leading us said, and landed on the ground. She turned to us. The others landed beside her, and I eventually caught up. "Why does everyone have to fly so fast?" I thought, annoyed. "Her Majesty Queen Ompera has requested your presence in 1 hour in Her Majesty's royal chambers," the guide said. Her Majesty's chambers? Why?" Suma asked. "She wishes to speak with you about Sentinel and your future in the army." The guide turned to Captain, who was with us. "My apologies, but she has only extended this offer to Lady Suma and Sir Sentinel." The captain seemed bothered, but didn't say anything about it. Over our private connection, Suma asked, "What do you think, Jake?" "I think I'm not dressed to meet royalty, but we might be better off accepting." We accept the Queen's invitation," Suma said to the Niema. "Excellent, Captain Rosian. I will have someone else escort you out. Lady Suma, Sir Sentinel, please follow me to the waiting area so that we may discuss royal etiquette." The guide motioned to a nearby Niema, who was perched on a metal pole, and Captain and Niema flew off. I'm no expert, but I was pretty sure that he was unhappy. "Maybe you should just fly ahead and summon me when you get there," I suggested, not wanting to try and chase after them anymore. "All right, we will wait for the guard to return and to stay with you, and then we will fly ahead," the guide said. A few minutes passed, and the guard returned, and they flew away, and eventually I was summoned. When I woke up, I was standing in a large auditorium-like room. There were wooden pillars along the walls, and each of them were made of what looked like whole trees that had been twisted together like a loose braid. Along the outer edges of the pillars were bright, multicolored flowers, some of which had different red, orange, and purple fruits. "Nice place," I said, looking around. "Queen Ompera will arrive shortly. Let me explain proper meeting protocols," the guide said. She was perched on a bar near the center of the room. "Firstly, the Queen will enter the room from the left of our current position and will settle there." She pointed at a large hole in the wall that I assumed led outside, and then motioned to a vertical post made of polished metal. At the top of the post were several tangled vines, making a kind of nest-shaped area. "Before this happens, we will signal you to bow. Sentinel, do your people have a concept of this act?" "Yes, I come from a country with a queen as well, Queen Elizabeth II. Can you please demonstrate your people's bow to your queen?" I bowed my head in a traditional way. I suppose that'll be fine, but if there is anything else you could do, I do not wish for anyone to claim that you are being rude to Her Majesty," the guide asked. "Well, hundreds of years ago we would get down on one knee, but that fell out of fashion," I explained, and then demonstrated the bow. "I'm sorry to ask, but would you mind doing that one? It is much closer to the one our people use, and I feel it'll go better with her ministers and attendants." "I don't mind. I want to be respectful too," I said, standing back up. "Thank you, Sentinel. Moving on, once the Queen has taken her place, she will allow you to rise and introduce herself formally. After she does that, you will do the same, and your meeting will formally begin. She will explain why she has invited you here, and she may even drop the formalities at that point. From there, simply respond in a respectful and appropriate way. Once she has finished, she will dismiss you, and we will guide you out. Do you have any questions?" Sentinel was curious if he was dressed in appropriate garments to meet with the Queen," Suma said, and I snorted. I doubt she was making a joke, but I still had to stop myself from laughing. "What he is wearing is perfectly suitable, but if he wishes to change, I believe he has plenty of time." I think I'll be fine," I said, still trying not to laugh. We spent the next hour talking about Queen Ompera with the guide, and several Niema brought us seeds with pots of dirt in case we wanted food. Once the hour was up, it was time to meet the Queen. End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 31. Jake's Point of View. Just like we were told, Queen Ompera flew into the room from our left, and we received our signal to bow. Once she had landed on her polished metal pole, she said,
Please raise your heads. Her voice sounded young to me, but either Suma and the guide didn't notice, or it was normal to them, because neither of them reacted to it. Even after hearing her speak in the courtroom earlier, it still caught me off guard. Thankfully, my head was down, so I don't think anyone noticed my reaction. I stood up, as did Suma and the guide. It was at that point I noticed that she hadn't entered the room alone. Beside her were 4 large bestial familiars and her guards, the royal mage masters. I am Queen Umpera, 64th heir of the throne of Ambos, and ruler of our great country. Great Queen Umpera of Ambos. Suma started introducing herself. I am Suma of Count Theocoma Isabel's domain, master of the familiar called Sentinel. Now it was my turn. Great Queen Umpera of Ambos. I am the familiar Sentinel. It is a pleasure to meet you, Suma and Sentinel, and thank you for answering my summons. Please be at ease, she said. With that, we all relaxed a bit, except for her guards who were busy staring daggers into my soul. Thank you, Your Majesty, Suma said. Lady Suma, familiar Sentinel, the reason I have called you here today is simple. I have several questions that I would like you to answer, and concerns I would like you to put to rest, the Queen said. We would be happy to answer any questions Your Majesty has, Suma said. I decided to let Suma do most of the talking, just in case I accidentally offended the Queen somehow. My questions are mostly pertain to your familiar, Lady Suma. But I do have one for you, the Queen said to my dismay. Lady Suma, how did you manage to summon Sentinel? According to what I have been told about you, your familiar is one powerful enough to give even a court mage trouble during summoning, let alone a domination ritual. What method did you use? When I first summoned him, he was rather young and much weaker. So he has been your familiar for many years, then. Our records indicate that he was only acquired by you within the last 2 years. The records are correct, however. I've also spent some time attempting to figure out as well. Eventually, I concluded it was because I used a malefic summoning technique the first time I summoned Sentinel. Although outdated now, it has been taught at my academy at the time as primary summoning method, Suma explained, although I didn't understand. I see. Well, that explains how you were able to summon him after he had reached maturity at least. Suma then spoke to me over our private connection. I can explain that to you later, Jake. Well then, Sentinel, are you ready to answer my questions? Yes, Queen Umpera, I am. My first question is simple. Sentinel, who are you? I'm sorry, can I ask what you mean? The Queen took a breath. Sentinel, I wish to speak plainly. You frighten me more than I can express. When I look at you, I am reminded of nightmares I had as a child, of the stories of the Vikings who slaughtered a path across Ambos and all the countries on this continent, and of the carvings left by the survivors of that time. To me, you appear as a monster out of a child's tale. So, Sentinel, I want to know, who are you? Are you a monster, a weapon, or something else? I sighed. I'm just a guy. I don't know what else to say. There was silence, and I used it to think about my answer. Queen Umpera, my name is Jake, and when I became Suma's familiar, she gave me the name Sentinel. I am not a Viking, but honestly, you're not exactly wrong. I am probably the descendant of the Vikings. Well, maybe. It's really unclear, actually. Who am I? I don't know. I'm a soldier in your army, a son and a friend to Suma. I'm not a monster. There was another long pause. During it, I could feel waves of anxiety flowing from Suma, and when I looked over at her, she was staring straight down at the floor, and her sparkle had almost completely stopped. Okay, Sentinel, I choose to believe you, Queen Umpera said finally. However, I have a request to make of you both. Please leave the royal army. What? Why, my queen? Suma asked. When my father, Queen Umpat, was still in power, and he heard that your familiar, Sentinel, had defeated a drake in single combat, as well as a magistrate, he immediately consulted his advisors. After much deliberation, they concluded that the best thing to do would be to make him into our country's weapon. When she said that, I felt a lump in my throat. I was shocked, obviously, but not really surprised. I always wondered about that, honestly. However, he died before he could put any of these plans into motion. I breathed a sigh of relief. I take it that you don't have the same plans then, I asked, that lump still in my throat.
I do not. But why ask us to leave your army? Suma asked. Because I do not wish for the two of you to become weapons, especially not ones that may put Amboss in peril. We would not turn against Amboss or you, my queen, Suma said.
That's true, I agreed. Personally, I liked this country. It had friendly people, and I was making a killing selling paper last year.
I am not worried that you will attack my country, but about how the nobility might use you.
Suddenly, it clicked. Ah, I see.
See what? Suma asked.
Lady Suma, the balance of power in the country, where would you say it lies? The queen asked. With you, Queen Emperor.
And why is that?
Because you are the queen.
And how did I become the queen? I do not know. Because you were born first?
Suma guessed.
No, I was my father's fourth child and my mother's second. Then, I'm afraid I don't know, my queen.
Politics, I said.
You are correct, Sentinel. After the death of my father's first child, who was originally going to inherit the throne, several factions formed, and the nobles that supported me were victorious.
That's the way things used to be done on Earth too, I said.
And now the nobles that supported my actions are given higher priority, and the ones that did not were dealt with. That is why I am the queen, Lady Suma. I see, Suma said quietly.
The queen looked over at me, her eyes all but boring a hole into my head.
However, I am not a fool. Sentinel, your very existence could throw the balance of power into turmoil. Even if Zakasham, your influences, has already caused an upset, or rather, an enhanced one.
The magistrate, I asked.
As well as his supporters, the queen shook her head and ruffled her feathers. Already I have had to put down an attempted noble rebellion against the Grand Duke. I do not wish for more bloodshed.
But will leaving the army really solve anything? I wondered.
I do not know. It is my hope that you do not become unwitting pawns during your time there. I cannot, or rather, do not wish to, force you to leave the army. However, I can have your mandatory service waived and compensate you if you choose to leave.
Suma and I looked at one another. What do you think? I asked.
Suma turned back to the queen. May we have some time to discuss this, my queen?
Queen Emperor nodded her head.
Yes. Please take as long as you see fit. Once you've made your decision, return to the council, and I will meet with you again.
End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 32. Jake's Point of View. Outside the castle, and after our short meeting with the Queen, Suma and I had a lot to talk about. Do you feel like we've had more conversations about major life-changing decisions in the last 2 days than we have since joining the army? I asked, mostly thinking aloud.
We knew this trip could change our lives. I suppose it is to be expected, Suma said, now perched on his shoulder as we walked away from the entrance to the castle. Jake, I believe I already know how I feel about the Queen's request, but I want to hear your opinion as well.
I don't know. My mum would be happy, and we would definitely be safer, but it feels wrong somehow, I said, and stopped in the shade of a large tree with twisted branches. Suma flew off my shoulder and landed on a knot growing out one of the tree's roots. I sat on the ground next to her and crossed my legs.
I agree, Suma said.
Really? But I thought you only joined the army because you had to.
It is true that everyone at the academy was required to do military service, but I still wish to join.
Why? I asked, surprised. Suma wasn't exactly a fighter, so it didn't make much sense.
Because of the island of Sangu and the Southern Union forces on it.
What about them?
3 years ago, 1 year before I summoned you and you agreed to become my familiar, the Southern Union forces took the island and our country lost contact with it. I remember so many Niema of my city volunteered after we heard what happened. I watched as over 500 Niema took flight and flew for different cities around Amboss to register to join the army. It was inspiring, and I have wanted to do my part in this war for some time now. I am no soldier, but I was gifted in healing magic, so I registered with the army as soon as I was able.
While she talked, I was reminded of the documentaries I had watched growing up about September 11th attacks on the Twin Towers. In those documentaries, they always mentioned how recruitment numbers for the American militaries went up after the attacks. The Southern Union takes an island must have been a fairly similar for Suma and the Niema. Okay, I think I get it. So we aren't quitting then?
I hope you can understand, Jake.
Forget it. I said I didn't want to quit either, remember? Let's go tell the Queen, I said. Suma seemed happy, or maybe relieved. As she fluttered back onto my shoulder, we left the shade of the tree and headed for the castle entrance again.
Do you believe that she'll be surprised we decided to stay in the army?
Probably. She did offer us a lot if we quit, so she might be disappointed. I would have shrugged, but I didn't want to knock Suma off balance. As we walked, we talked about what we should say to the Queen, but we arrived at the guards again before we made any real progress. You're back already. We only just received the word that you would be returning and to let you in, the guard said, confused, but opened the entrance nonetheless. One of them guided us to the Queen's chamber and waited with us until our guide from earlier met up with us.
Back so soon? Good news, I hope,
he said and landed on a metal bar.
We have made our decision, Suma said.
The guide's feathers pressed down closer to his body.
I see.
Not good news then. The Queen will be disappointed, but it was your decision to make. Once again, he and Suma flew off without me, and I was summoned a moment later. But this time, Queen Ampera was already on a polished metal perch, waiting.
Such swiftness in your decisions. I hope that it bodes well for me.
Our apologies, Your Majesty, Suma started, and the Queen shook her head, already knowing what was coming.
But we have decided to stay within the ranks of the army.
I see. This is unfortunate, but not entirely unexpected. She stayed quiet for a moment, and was most likely thinking, very well, I shall keep my word and not interfere with your time in my army. I wish you both luck and safety.
Thank you, my Queen, Suma said, and bowed deeply.
But before you go, I want to warn you. The Royal Council may not feel the same way. Be careful. They do not take kindly to being denied, and they would rather burn a fruit tree than let even a single fruit feed an enemy. Be wary of them. With that ominous warning, she dismissed us and told us that we were now free to return to our duties at our squad's base. After leaving the council, Suma sent me back home, and she left to meet up with her traveling group so they could head back to the base. I reappeared back in my room at my mum's house and called out to her, "Mum!" I poked my head out of the door and yelled, but there was no answer. I checked the phone I left on my bed and saw a text from her from about an hour ago. It read, "Jake, I'm going to see my friend Susan in the hospital. She fell and broke her wrist. I won't be back for a while. Call me when you get home." Dang! Hope Susan's okay, I mumbled and called Mum. There was no answer, so I texted her that I was home and that everything went good. After that, I called Robert, my lawyer, to see if there was anything I needed to know about. "Hello," Robert answered. "Hey, Robert, it's Jake. I just wanted to touch base about the whole detective stalking thing," I said, in my most professional-sounding voice. "Ah, Jake, glad you called. I do actually have some news about that. Lynn, the detective who was stalking you, has been suspended without pay, pending review." "That's good, I guess," I said. "I told you the system works. All we have to do is file the proper complaints and let the chips fall on her. It's an open and shut case. You can expect a good payout from it, too," Robert said proudly. He got a percentage of any money I made during a case, so he was probably pretty happy, too. "Well, I don't exactly need a lot of money, but I guess that's good. Stop by my office when you get a chance. I have some paperwork I need you to sign." "Okay. I'm not doing anything right now, so I'll head over." "Good deal. See you in a bit." "Bye," I said, and hung up the phone. When I travel to Atmosia, I prefer to do it light, so I usually empty my pockets before Suma summons me. The only things I bring with me are the clothes on my back. I used to bring a backpack full of items, but I put a summoning spell on that, so now I don't need to remember to grab it anymore. I just have to remember to keep it stocked with what I need when I come back to Earth. Usually, I leave my key, wallet, and phone in it, just in case. I've finally gotten to the point where I can summon what I need, even while on Earth, but I still can't cast real spells yet. One time, I formed a few handfuls of water, and even managed to freeze them, but immediately I felt like I needed a nap. After summoning my bag from Atmosia, I scrounged through it and dug out my stuff, before hopping in my car and driving to Robert's office. 15 minutes later, I was pulling into a car park 3 blocks away from his office. After finding a spot to park, I got out and started walking. As I turned a corner, I noticed another car pulling into the lot. Normally, I wouldn't care, except that I recognized the car. It was Detective Lynn's car, the same one I saw in my neighbor's driveway a few nights ago. She stepped out of her car and ran towards me. So, I started running. At this point, I was getting annoyed. Cutting down an alley, I decided to hide again. It worked last time, after all. Just two problems. Firstly, there was nothing to hide behind in this alley. Second, it was a dead-end alley. I looked up, but there wasn't a fire escape in this alley. Perfect, I groaned.
Jake Vandal,
Detective Lynn said, sounding a bit out of breath as she entered the alley herself.
You're a hard man to pin down.
End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 33. Jake's Point of View. My heart was pounding in my ears. What do you want? I glanced around the alley, still desperately trying to figure out what to do.
I want answers, she said. What are you?
What's that supposed to mean? I asked, not really interested in a response. I just needed to keep her talking until I found a way out. The detective is blocking the only entrance of the alley. I could summon a weapon, but that would, I thought. But her answer broke my train of thought.
I saw you vanish in that cell. How did you do it? Are you an alien?
When she said that, I had the kind of out-of-body experience. My mind went blank for a second, and it was quiet for a moment. She repeated a question. What are you? I'm not an alien, I stammered. The inside of my head quickly shifted from dead calm to empty to something akin to a hornet's nest. She saw, frick. How did she see? Was she still in the room? Did I not see her? It must be that mirror. I'm an idiot. Frick, frick, frick.
Then what?
She asked. Her eyes were laser-locked onto me, like she was staring into my soul. I'm just a guy, a human.
Humans can't teleport or turn invisible or whatever.
I don't. I was lost for words, but the hornet's nest was still going. Do I explain to her the truth? What do I do? What will she do if she finds out? Is she part of the government? I can't tell her, can I?
Say something,
she snapped. I don't know what to say. She hung her head for a moment, then ran both her hands through the top of her hair.
4 weeks.
I've been questioning everything. My sanity, my job, my health. There has not been one iota of my life that I have not wondered if it was true, or if it mattered, or anything. She sighed and shook her head.
I have felt crazy for weeks, so no. You can't just get off with, I don't know what to say. How do you teleport? Who were you talking to?
Magic and a mage, I finally answered. She squinted and made a confused face.
Magic? Really?
Her tone and voice sounded very annoyed. Is it any less believable than aliens? I asked, still tense.
Yes, 1,000,000 times yes.
I thought about it for a second. Well, technically, it was aliens, but I am a human. It really was magic, though.
Explain it to me.
No, I'm sorry, but it's too dangerous. You work for the government, and not to mention, you've been stalking me for a while now, I said.
Well, what would you have done in my shoes? She asked defiantly.
Probably the same thing, if I'm being honest. I shrugged and decided to do something bold, but I'm not telling you anything. Now get out of my way. I started walking towards her, getting ready to push her aside and make a run for it. But instead, she punched me in the face. Before I could hit her back, she had already tackled me to the ground.
Assaulting an officer, fleeing arrest, resisting arrest. I'll figure out how you did it in one way or the other, she said, and tried to handcuff me. It didn't work, though. She had only 2/3 my body weight, maybe 75 kilos, and that was assuming that she was soaking wet. I was 100 kilos of muscle, which I used to throw her off of me like a wet rag. She was sneaky, though. She whipped around her stun gun and jammed it into my side. Instinctively, I summoned Igus and whacked her with it in the head. Hard, too. She hit the pavement like a sack of bricks in a river, and I took off running. I didn't even bother sending away Igus first. I just ran without stilling my arm. I ran all the way to Robert's office and locked the door behind me. As soon as I entered the building, I unsummoned Igus and went straight to his office and told him what happened. He called the police, who arrived 10 minutes later, and took my statement. Of course, I was worried about getting arrested, but that didn't happen, probably because Robert did most of the talking. By the end of it, it was really Robert giving my statement and me sitting quietly listening to him threatening to sue the entire department for such a blatant misuse of something. Admittedly, I stopped listening after 20 or so minutes and started thinking about what I was going to do. The detective saw me go to Suma's world, and she saw me summon Igus, and she knows I was talking to someone. This is going to be a headache, I thought. After the police finished questioning me, Robert and I talked about our next move, and then the police escorted me back to my car. I drove home and immediately called my mum again, but she still didn't pick up. I texted her to call me when she was free, and sat in my bed, totally exhausted. I fell asleep pretty quickly, but didn't dream.
Instead, I was floating in that familiar black void again. Oh, great. I'm too tired for this. Jake! Vandal! The crazy voice said. Zachariah. No! He shouted. Well, he always shouts when his crazy voice is out, but this time it was a lot louder. Even in the endless void, there was an echo. I've seen your memories. I know who you are. You locked the memories away. You did not see them. You did not know anything, but I know. They were hurting me. Wait. What do you mean, locked them away? I know, Zachariah repeated. Hold on. What did you mean? I haven't locked anything away. They just stopped. I know how to escape. Escape? I asked, realizing he wasn't going to answer my questions. If only you had a bit more control, little Vikinger. You might not have undone yourself. With that, Zachariah began to laugh, and I felt some kind of pressure in my head. It was so intense, I think I blacked out. But before I did, I heard something. I summon you, Sentinel. Right on time. End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 34. Suma's Point of View. I was flying through the air above the city of Ágoston Szabó, keeping well below the tops of the city walls, searching for my traveling crew. After spotting them near one of the city's gates, I landed beside them on the ground. All right, now that Private Suma is here, our group is complete. It is time to go back to base. Fly in synchronization, everyone, the captain said, and led us to the city gates to go through the city guards check again. One by one, we showed them our orders and were allowed to exit the city. I was the last to exit, and just before it was my turn, I noticed one of my companions, another private, regularly look behind our group. I looked around as well, but did not know what he was looking at. After we had all made it through, we flew in a tight formation to the desert and met with our guide once more. Following the guide, we flew out 2 hours through the desert. I noticed the private talking to the captain at the front of our formation, but I could not hear what they were saying. Eventually, I saw the private look behind him again. Once more, I searched for what he was looking at, and this time I saw it. A large group of 20 or 30 Nyama. Land! The captain ordered, and dived to the sand below. We all followed him and landed in the desert as well. We are being followed. I noticed them watching us in the city, the private said. They are most likely bandits. Everyone take battle positions, create barriers, and summon your familiars. The captain ordered and began his own summoning spell. Before I realized what he said, the captain's salamander was already beside him and preparing itself for battle. I was about to summon Jake when one of the others, a lieutenant, made an announcement. Hold, Cap! It looks like those Nyama following us are court mages. Are you sure? Confirming, the lieutenant said, and cast a spell. His eyes shimmered dull yellow for a moment. Confirm, sir, they are court mages. Hold, everyone! We do not want to start a fight with court mages. Let's see what they want. We all waited tensely as the mages drew closer. Within moments, they were close enough to see, even without a spell to improve eyesight. Sir, one of the mages is... The lieutenant did not finish his sentence, because from the direction of the mages, a bolt of flame tore through his body, getting him. What was left of him fell to the ground and caught fire. Counterattack! The captain ordered, and launched a bolt of lightning towards the attacking mages. Summon your familiars! I summon you. I summon you. I summon you. One by one, each of my companions called their familiars, while I was left in shock of what was happening. Lady Suma, one of the privates, who had summoned his own familiar, said, and raised a wall of stone between us and the attackers. You need to... An attacking mage had flown over the private's hastily built wall and launched an attack from above. It tore the private's wings from his body, and he crumpled to the sand, screaming in agony. Healing, I said, getting myself oriented and quickly tried to stop his bleeding. The wound slowly closed, but his wing was never going to be able to be retracted now. Not that it mattered anyway, as it was currently burning to cinders in the sand nearby. Lady Suma, your familiar, summon him! The private yelled, still in pain. Yes, I summon you, Sentinel. Normally, summoning Jake is more difficult than summoning anything else. Perhaps it is due to him coming from a different world, or because his world has no magic. I never knew the answer. However, this time summoning him felt as if I was trying to uproot a tree with mana molding. It was like he was stuck. In the end, though, I watched as he appeared, and for a moment I was relieved. But as soon as he appeared, I knew something was wrong. Finally, Jake said, and took a deep breath. He stood motionless, eerily calm even, as the sound of the death echoed around him. "The target has arrived! Focus your attacks on it!" one of the attacking court mages shouted. Without a moment's hesitation, 3 of the mages began flying around Jake and attacking him relentlessly. Summoning him had taken all of my strength, so I was too weak to move or help him. I was forced to watch as attack after attack pummeled Jake's body, ripping his flesh away each time. The first attack took off a large section of his face, revealing the bones underneath. The next ones were aimed at his body and burned holes through his stomach and ribs. The final attack was an explosion that threw his body through the air and against the stone wall that was meant to protect us. As he slammed into the wall, I heard the terrible sounds of breaking bones. "No!" I screamed. "The Viking is dead! Clean up the rest and—" one of the attackers said, but was interrupted. "Very good. I see the court mages of this era haven't lost their spirit," Jake said from the ground. Without warning, his body was surrounded in a massive manner, colored blue and purple. With several loud pops, his broken limbs realigned themselves, and with a sickening squelch, the flesh on his body regrew and once again covered his bones. Jake slowly stood up, his garments ripping and covered in bones and his blood, and smiled. The mana around his body began to swirl and twist violently, like a funnel cloud. "I don't have long, so I think I'll enjoy myself." He raised one hand to the 3 mages who had attacked him. "Rot," he said simply. What is?" one of the attackers tried to say, but his feathers suddenly turned brown, then black. His beak corroded and his feet curled in on themselves. His body began to bloat, until the Niama fell to the ground. His terrified allies all looked on in horror, before they suffered the same fate. "Jake!" I yelled, horrified, not knowing what to say. That was death magic." "Yes, and so is this," he answered, and turned to the next nearest court mage. The mage tried to fly away, to escape, but failed. "Starve," Jake said, and the Niama shriveled up and fell to the ground. He was barely more than bones and feathers, mere seconds after hitting the ground. "Retreat," one of the remaining Niama ordered, and what was left of the attackers all started to fly towards the capital. There were only 3 of them left now, and that Jake had slaughtered the rest. Still smiling in that same sickening, twisting way, Jake cast one final spell. "They are your enemy!" At first, nothing seemed to happen, but as 3 court mages retreated, one slowly started to fall behind. Without warning, the mages cast spells that engulfed all 3 of them in a cloud of lightning. I imagine they were dead before they hit the ground. But if they were not, they were afterwards. The cloud of mana around Jake stopped spinning and dissipated. "Jake, what have you done?" I asked, looking up at Jake. "My name, little Niama, is Deja." Jake, or Deja, raised one hand in front of him, and a black flame ignited above his hand. It was so turbulent and hot that I could feel it, even though I was several wingspans away. It was so hot, even the skin on his hand was blistering as he generated it. He raised it above his head. He was going to throw it at me. "I am going to die," I thought to myself. "No!" Deja screamed, and a red magic circle appeared on his shoulder. It was a magic circle that appeared when Jake became my familiar, and it was spreading across Deja's body, burning him as it did. However, for some reason, the burns healed as soon as it appeared. A moment later, the circle dissipated, and Deja was left breathing heavily and angrily examining himself. "A familiar's curse!" He turned to me. "Oh, you must be Suma! I should have guessed." Who are you? Where is Jake?" I demanded. "Shh! He's asleep." Suddenly, Deja screamed very upset. "That's not... I have more time!" He clutched his head and mumbled to himself, "You! No! No!" With that, I felt the summoning activate on Jake's body, but I was not the one performing the spell, despite being able to sense it as if I were. And Jake vanished. This time, the summoning felt normal again. What just happened?" a voice behind me asked, startling me. It was Captain Rizoan. End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 35. Suma's Point of View. We were left alone in that desert, surrounded by the bodies of our murdered comrades. After a far too brief count of who survived, we discovered that only 4 of us remained. Myself, Captain Rizoan, one lieutenant, and the private whose wing had been removed in the attack. I was still in shock, but while everyone began discussing what to do, I was treating the private to the best of my ability. "What happened? Why were we attacked?" now the anxious lieutenant asked. "Are we sure they were court mages?" the captain asked. "Yes, sir. They were wearing the symbols of the court, and they were certainly powerful enough, the lieutenant answered. I saw the captain glance at me for a moment, but I was too distracted with the dying private and my own thoughts to think about why. Captain, this private needs a full team of healers, not one. He will likely not survive if he does not get proper treatment, I said. We'll carry him back to the capital, the captain answered. Captain, are we sure that's wise? If more mages, the lieutenant interjected, but the captain cut him off. Those mages, whomever they were, attacked us in the wasteland after waiting for us to leave the city. They will not risk attacking us in a major population. How do you know that, sir? I asked. Captain Rizoan looked at me. I do not, but that Niama, he needs healing, and you cannot do it alone. We have no choice. I am not sure that he will survive, even if we do take him to the city, Captain, I said. I looked down at the private, who was covered in his own blood. Where his wing was once attached, now existed only a bloody stump, scarred over by healing magic and burnt feathers. The glow from the private's besmears was nearly completely gone. If I had not started healing him, if I had waited even a moment longer... You did well, Private Super. Your familiar saved us, and I will have to give me my thanks, the captain said. Jake, I thought. No, that was not Jake. I decided not to bring up what had actually happened. Not yet. After wrapping the wounded private in their manner, the captain and lieutenant carried him back to the city. I flew closely to him and monitored his wound, occasionally casting healing spells as needed. The private was, of course, light enough that only one of them actually needed to carry him. But in order to keep his body as stable as possible, both worked together. We flew quickly but carefully, and we all watched the skies for more mages that may have survived, or simply been waiting. Eventually, we landed in front of the guard station, and one of them flew over to us. What happened to this Nieba? The guard asked. I'm Captain Rizoan, and this is my lieutenant, and these two are privates. Our squad was attacked. This Nieba needs the immediate attention of healers. Upon hearing the captain's brief explanation, the guard's eyes glowed yellow, and a magic circle formed around the ground and around him. I felt the feathers stand up, but nothing happened. A moment later, the guard's spell was over. The healers are on their way. Explain what happened. Do you know who attacked you? We were attacked by mages bearing the symbol of the royal court. They killed several members of our group in the desert, the captain said. Court mages? What? Why would they attack you? I do not know. We were their invited guests just yesterday. How did you escape? The guard asked. At that same time, 3 Niema landed beside the private, whom I was still treating, and cast several spells on him, while 4 of the other guards landed beside the first 2 who was already interrogating us. Some of the guards cast mana-wrapping spells around the private and prepared to carry him off with the healers. We'll take it from here, one of them said. I fluttered back and out of their way. We did not escape. We summoned our familiars and fought them off. They retreated, but I saw them cast a spell as they flew away that killed all of their survivors. And himself. Killed themselves? Why? The guard asked. I believe, Captain Rizoan glanced at me, that a spell was cast on them that affected their minds, making them turn on each other. Do you know who cast that spell? It was one of our familiars. I see, the guard said. You all will have to follow me, so that we can confirm your story. The guard led the 3 of us to a local station, a large structure formed from molded stone and reinforced with sculpted trees. It was half buried into the side of the city's wall, a well-defended location. Admittedly, I became nervous at the thought of going into the station, even to the point that the captain took notice. It'll be fine. The city's guards are not under the supervision of the council. They are controlled directly by the royal mages and a local judge, he reassured me. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Captain, I said. We were led into a room, and a single guard joined us, along with 2 mages, one of which introduced himself as a memory delver. Immediately, I was struck with a sense of familiarity, and I realized I had been in this situation before, 1.5 years ago, when Jake and I were attacked by those nobles. First, the captain and the lieutenant were questioned by the memory delver and the guard, while the second mage cast a spell that linked the 3 of their minds together. He asked them both the same questions, and both the delver and the guard seemed to agree that neither was lying. Finally, it was my turn. The mage cast a spell at me, and the guard began asking his questions. How did the attack begin? He asked. One of the lieutenants saw mages in the distance, and then they attacked us, I said. How many attackers were there? Many, 20 or more. Everything happened so fast, it all became a blur during the chaos. After you summoned your familiar, the one who drove off the attackers, what did you do? During the captain and lieutenant's questioning, they had discussed Jake's actions. The private, he lost his wing. I cast a healing spell on him, I said. The three looked at one another, most likely talking privately through their connection. They seemed confused.
You're familiar. You are conflicted about him. Why? The guard asked. He was not,
I looked away for a moment and towards the captain. The memory delver seemed concerned, and soon that demeanor was shared by the other two as well.
I do not believe the thing I summoned was Jake.
What do you mean? The captain asked.
It looked like Jake and sounded like him, but it did not act like him, I said, nearly singing.
After everything, I was only barely able to hold myself together. My breathing was ragged, and I can only imagine how I must have appeared. It took some time after the battle, but I had eventually noticed I was covered in the private's blood and sand from the desert.
The image of your familiar, that what you saw in the battle, are conflicted with your mind, Private Zuma. At the very least, you believe what you are saying, the guard said. Please, think about the events you witnessed.
I thought about how I watched Jake cast those spells, mutilate those mages, and eventually try to turn on me. The familiar's curse stopped him from turning on me. The memory delver spoke for the first time since she introduced herself.
Yes. I do not know what it was that I summoned, but Jake would never try and harm me, and he would never use death magic to kill people, I said, and the image of that noble in the alleyway appeared in my mind.
You have had experience with death magic. It still haunts you, the guard said after a moment of silence. Suddenly, the mage maintaining the memory delve ended the spell. We have all the information we need. Your group was attacked by mages, apparently from the royal court. Then you defended yourself. That much is clear.
Yes. I assume the city guards will pursue the proper course of action and get my fallen soldiers the justice they deserve,
Captain Rizzoan asked intensely, as if he was asking the guards would not simply forget about this to prevent themselves from entering the poor graces of the council. I assure you we will investigate this matter fully. However, it seems that since everyone who attacked you was slain, that may end up more difficult a task that you or I may wish. The guard turned to me. However, death magic in all its forms, it is illegal by royal decree. Private Zuma, you'll need to remain here for a while longer, until the decision can be made on whether the actions of your familiar violate that decree. End Book 2, Chapter 36, Jake's Point of View. My head felt like it was going to explode, and then I heard Suma's voice, and the pain stopped. I expected to appear beside Suma, but instead, something bad happened. My body disappeared, but I stayed behind in that black void. Jake, a voice from the darkness said, can you hear me? Who's there? I asked, which was weird because I didn't have a mouth at the moment. Without a sound, the image of a flaming man slowly appeared in front of me, like an ember that kept getting bigger. It was the flaming figure again, but he was different this time. He was missing his reptilian half. My name is Zachariah. Don't worry. I'm a friend. He moved closer to me and wrapped his hands around where my head was. What's going on? What's happening? I asked, confused. Why did you attack me again? Where is my body? For some reason, I couldn't get angry or even scared, despite this being a pretty good excuse for both. I did not attack you. Well, I sort of did. Your body is in Antmeria, your master's world. You mean Atmosia? Is that what they're calling it now? It doesn't matter. What does matter is that Deja is in your body and is trying to keep it that way. Who's Deja? Focus. Your master's in trouble, he said urgently, but for some reason I still couldn't get upset. Okay, I'll focus. If what I think is going to happen happens, then we'll only have an instant to get you back into your body. What's going to happen? He's going to try and kill Suma, he said. The flames that make up his mouth lowered into a frown, like one of those theater masks with really exaggerated features. Actually, speaking of features, he didn't have many. He had a standard human shape, although it was made of flames, 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. But it all moved around, like I trying to look through fire. I'd prefer if he didn't. Focus, Jake. When he tried to kill Suma, the familiar's curse will activate. It'll give us just a moment to pull your body back here and put you back inside of it. How do we do that? You're going to invert your summoning. How do I do that? You haven't learned? But I gave you all those memories. Everything you needed to learn should have been in there, he yelled, and his face started to look angry. I haven't seen most of them. They made me sick too. Why did you do that? He groaned. All right, fine. I'll invert your magic for you, but you still need to perform the summoning. But I can't summon Suma, I pointed out. I don't want you to summon her. You need to summon yourself to her. But how do I do that? When I asked that, his head lowered slightly, and his face looked sad. I'm going to be stuck in here forever. You have weapons, right? Yes. Have you seen the red thread? Yes. Good! When I tell you, picture the red thread that connects you and your master, and imagine the half of it that connects to you drawing closer to her. And that'll summon me to Suma. It would, but I'm going to invert it. That will draw your body back here. Then what? Then you need to go back into your body. I'll send you home. And you won't be able to do this again? No. You'll try the next time you come through this place. He shook his head. Then how do I prevent this from happening again? I wondered, confused. By never crossing that boundary between worlds again. If you do, you will unleash danger again, and he will not make the same mistake twice. So, I can never see Suma again? I asked, still unable to feel sad, but I knew this is going to make me feel very sad later. I could send you to live with your master, or I can send, Jake, it's time, do it now, he shouted. The image of the thread came into mind. I saw it stretch between myself and Suma, connecting at the center of our heads. I pictured that thread going taut, and my half drawing closer to Suma. Then I felt a power flowing around me, and the thread turned blue. My body appeared next to me, and it was screaming, No! No! How? Zachariah reached into my body and pulled from my chest the flaming figure of a flaming serpentine-style dragon. He wrestled it for a moment before the two rejoined together and formed the familiar image of the figure in flames that I knew before. Its body twisted in onto itself as I moved closer to my body. And, like a blink, I was back inside it somehow. Go, Jake! The figure said and reached out with a human hand pointing at me. And never return! Darkness surrounded me again, and Zachariah's voice faded away. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't at home, but I wasn't with Suma either. I was laying in a desert, surrounded by dead Niema. End of story. Book 2, Chapter 37. Jake's Point of View. Looking around at all the dead Niema, I started to feel nauseous. I quickly picked myself up off the ground and ran away from the carnage. After making it about 20 feet, however, I was suddenly racked with exhaustion and soreness. My face was back in the sand before I knew what happened. Suma, are you there? I said weakly.
Jake, is that you? The real you?
She said over our private connection. What's going on? I'm in a desert and everyone's dead.
You are in the wasteland, but I saw you disappear. Do you remember what happened?
The dragon. He took my body. Oh, did he? Did I? Looking back at the bodies, my stomach tightened and I suddenly threw up.
Jake, are you okay?
Suma shouted. No. Can you summon me? I really don't want to be here, I said, looking away from the dead Niema, but still too weak to move. I was lying on my back, looking up at the bright pink sky with dull orange clouds hanging above me.
I do not think that is a good idea at the moment. Do you really not know what happened?
She asked, sounding very worried. I couldn't bring myself to look at the bodies again, but they still appeared in my mind nonetheless. Did he kill those people?
Most of them, yes. Jake, tell me what you know.
I spent the next few minutes connecting myself and telling Suma what happened from my point of view. After that, she told me what the dragon did with my body. She did not go into much detail, but she didn't have to. I'd gotten a pretty good look at the aftermath. The dragon, Danger, was brutal. Can you get me out of here now? There's something wrong with my body. It's as if I just went through 10 rounds of your healing, followed by 10 rounds of heavyweight boxer.
I still do not think it's a good idea, Jake. The city guards want you arrested. Do you feel as if you need medical treatment? If so, I'll summon you immediately. At that moment, I felt lightheaded, and despite remaining motionless, everything started to spin. I heard distorted voices like they were underwater, but they were slowly surfacing and growing clearer. I don't feel...
Jake! Suma shouted. With that, everything went dark. I expected to pass out, but instead, for a moment, it felt like I was waking up. My eyes opened, and I looked around. The only thing was, I wasn't the one who opened them, and I wasn't the one looking around. After what just happened, I started to panic, thinking maybe that the dragon had taken control of my body again. But it didn't feel anything like that. Instead, it felt more like I was dreaming. I'm hallucinating again. Now, I thought. Emotions and thoughts started flowing like a river, as if I was the one actually thinking them, except I knew it wasn't me. It was a memory of some kind. I'm going to get such a sunburn, I thought. I would have shaken my head, but I didn't have one at that moment. The memory started with darkness, like a summoning spell. When my eyesight came back, there was a bird standing on the ground looking up at me. Did he say how long he was going to be? The person, who was probably Zachariah, asked the Niema.
He will arrive shortly. I do ask you be on your best behavior. This is not like our meetings with the royal court or even the king. Asham is a close friend of mine and a very important figure to the dragons. Please be courteous.
The Niema, who was probably Amboss, said. I'll be nice, probably Zachariah said.
Thank you. Did your experiments with magic in your world go well?
Probably Amboss asked. No, doesn't work there. At least not like it does here.
Perhaps if you improve your skill with it here, it'll become easier there.
I don't know. Maybe. Probably Zachariah's head turned to the side, and he looked around for a moment after hearing an odd noise. Do you hear that?
Hear what?
It sounds like something shaking a cloak out. Probably Amboss looked around for a moment, then nodded his head while looking off into the horizon.
Ah, yes. Here he comes now. He should not be much longer.
I guess that is your people's amazing sight.
As strong as your magic is, Zachariah, I still do not understand how a species could possibly get by with such poor eyesight.
Zachariah, I knew it, I thought. Axes and bows, Zachariah answered mockingly. Less than a minute later, the source of the strange noise became visible. It was 2 dragons, and the noise was one of their wing beats. They were both massive, but one was colossal, a dozen of times larger than the horse-sized drake I fought. It was an Eastern-style dragon with serpent-like body, long whiskers that made up a kind of beard shape, 4 legs with claws at the end, kinda like a cat, and a row of short fins down its back. I don't know how it was flying, probably magic, because it actually didn't have any wings. The smaller one was about 2/3 the size of the bigger one, and was a stereotypical Western-style dragon. It had 4 legs, huge wings, a long neck, a horned head, and a long tail. It looked more bestial in nature, where the larger one looked more refined. My Valhalla, Zachariah said once he realized how huge they were. Dang, that's big, I thought, just as amazed as he was. When the 2 dragons landed, the winged one kicked up dust storm and landed with a thud, while the wingless one slowly spiraled down until it landed fairly gently.
Greetings, Asham, and greetings to you as well, Deja,
the Niema said. Hello, Amboss. It is good to see you again, and you must be Zachariah. I have heard so much about you from Amboss, the larger Eastern-style dragon said, and lowered his massive head down closer to us. Greetings, Asham. It is a pleasure to meet you both, Zachariah said.
I did not realize Deja would be joining us today, but another dragon is always welcome,
Amboss said. The smaller Western dragon did not lower his head down to Amboss's or Zachariah's level, but he did speak. I was told your familiar had an impressive amount of negative ether. I was intrigued and asked Asham for permission to join him today. Deja was watching me, or Zachariah, very closely. His voice was raspy and shrill. It was definitely not what I expected to come out of such a powerful-looking body. I do, but I'm afraid I've got no talent for it, Zachariah said. Deja cocked his head and lowered it down closer to Zachariah's. Talent is overrated. I have always preferred skill gained through practical application. You are the only other being I have met with the ability to use negative ether. My name is Deja. It is a pleasure to meet you. End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 38. Jake's Point of View. Without warning, the area around me in the dream shifted like a heat haze over pavement, and I became aware of the passage of time. I somehow knew nearly a year had passed, maybe longer. Now we were in a coliseum of sorts, and Deja's darkly scaled head hung over and behind me, watching as Zachariah performed his spell. A small purple fire formed on the ground in front of Zachariah as the 2 looked on.
You are improving. Your speed increases with each lesson, but let us see if it was successful,
Deja said, and formed a ball of water with his own magic. He floated it into the fire, left it for a moment, then slowly brought it out again. I expected it to be smaller, but instead it had grown in size and was completely frozen solid.
Excellent work. I say you've mastered this technique. Your understanding of negative aether is impressive for only studying it for a single year, and it only took you a matter of months to learn the inversion method unique to negative mages.
A student is only as good as his teacher. Thank you, Deja, Zachariah said. Deja dropped the ball of ice to the ground, shattering it to pieces. The purple flames that Zachariah had been controlling slowly died down, turning a normal orange and yellow, until finally snuffing itself out.
Zachariah, may I ask you a question?
Deja asked, laying on the ground in front of Zachariah. In a way, he looked like a lion on the savannah in some old documentary or Disney movie. Despite laying down, his head still towered over me, or Zachariah, technically. What weighs in your mind? Zachariah asked, looking up at the dragon's head.
What is your opinion of Asham?
It reminds me of my Jarl, Sten, the leader of my people, Clan Harufram Bjorn.
In what way?
He is a dragon of heavy words and mighty ideals, but not one of swift action. Deja nodded his head.
I find myself agreeing with that.
But you didn't ask me because you wanted to hear my opinion, Zachariah said, putting his hands on his axe hilts, which hung on his hips.
Did I not?
Deja said, cocking his head. No, you asked me because you wanted to tell me your opinion of him. Deja chuckled.
Perhaps I did.
So what is your opinion of Asham? Deja inhaled deeply.
He's too sentimental. It has held us back.
In what way?
Our people should have left this world centuries ago, but Asham's sentimentality for these Nyama has kept us here.
Is it wrong to love this place, these people? This land is full of life. Why leave?
It is not wrong to love life, but...
Deja swung his massive head to the side and looked at the mountains in the distance.
I would hardly call this place alive.
I'm afraid I don't understand. What do you mean?
This world. It has grass and trees and beings to eat them, but they are mere facsimiles of life.
Zachariah looked around. It all looks real enough to me.
Tell me, Zachariah, do your people have the ability to sense aether?
Deja asked, looking down at Zachariah. No, although I am aware it is possible for the Nyama.
We dragons are also able to sense the aether. Far more than them, and this world feels like the driest of deserts to me.
Deja moved his head closer to Zachariah.
You are alive with aether. It pours off of you, like it should pour off of all truly living beings. The Nyama, however, they are like wisps, or bones left to dry out in the arid sands. The world you come from, Zachariah, it must have been so full of aether, so full of beauty.
Aye, it was beautiful. But I had never seen magic like this world as while I was there, Zachariah said. And to me, this world just looks as majestic. Deja snorted in response.
You should have seen this world when we first found it. It was a barren wasteland. We made it what it is today.
If you made this world, then why do you hate it?
I do not hate it. I feel no more for it than I would feel for one of the axes you craft. This world was an interesting experiment, but it is one that should have ended by now.
If you feel so strongly, then why not speak to Asham? Surely he would hear you, Zachariah said.
He would let me go. I am no one's captive here. However, he and all those loyal to him would stay, which would be most of the dragons.
Are there no more dragons out there?
There are, but just as you have your clan, I have mine.
So, you do not wish to leave your people, but you can't stay here any longer. Why not take the others who feel the same as you do and go home? Wait for the rest of your people to join you there.
If we go home without Asham, we may never find our way there. Only Asham knows the way.
Ah, I see, Zachariah said. As I watched this conversation, the haze reformed around me, and the memory shifted away again. Dang it, I thought. That was getting interesting. When the haze finally disappeared, I was in a new memory, and I think I was several years in the future from the last one. It was dark, and I could smell the sea. I was in a wooden room, slowly moving up and down. Am I in a boat? Zachariah was lying on a mat on the floor, but eventually he stood up and walked outside. There was no door. Instead, there was simply a circular opening large enough for a Nyama to fly through. But for Zachariah, it was a bit of a squeeze. Leaving the sleeping Nyama, Zachariah went to the top deck of the ship. I hadn't heard it before, but as we got closer to the deck, I heard the sounds of rain. I readied myself to get wet, but it was pointless. The rain wasn't hitting the ship. Small glowing runes on the floor were projecting a bubble that deflected the rain. Inside that bubble, Niema flew around hurriedly, each to do some task.
Zachariah, what are you still doing up? Couldn't sleep?
A voice from above him called out. He turned and saw that it was Ambrose, who softly landed on a pile of wooden boards left on the deck. I'm afraid not. My mind is racing with what's ahead, Zachariah said, leaning over the side of the ship. He stuck his hand outside the barrier and let the cold rain pour over his arm. Asham, dead. It almost seems impossible.
I do not wish to believe it myself, but the messenger was clear.
Why would Danger do this? I know he and Asham held their differences, but to kill one Jarl, his friend, I do not understand.
Of all the dragons, Danger is the most incomprehensible.
I feel as if this were somehow my fault, that if I'd given him better advice or... I do not know.
Danger's actions, while villainous, were his own. You supported him as best you could. You must not take responsibility for his deeds.
My mind knows this, but my heart does not believe it. Zachariah shook his head and pulled his hand back from the rain. End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 37. Jake's Point of View. Looking around at all the dead Niema, I started to feel nauseous. I quickly picked myself up off the ground and ran away from the carnage. After making it about 20 feet, however, I was suddenly racked with exhaustion and soreness. My face was back in the sand before I knew what happened. Zuma, are you there? I said weakly.
Jake, is that you? The real you?
She said over our private connection. What's going on? I'm in a desert and everyone's dead.
You are in the wasteland, but I saw you disappear. Do you remember what happened?
The dragon. He took my body. Oh, did he? Did I? Looking back at the bodies, my stomach tightened and I suddenly threw up.
Jake, are you okay?
Suma shouted. No! Can you summon me? I really don't want to be here, I said, looking away from the dead Niema, but still too weak to move. I was lying on my back, looking up at the bright pink sky with dull orange clouds hanging above me.
I do not think that is a good idea at the moment. Do you really not know what happened?
She asked, sounding very worried. I couldn't bring myself to look at the bodies again, but they still appeared in my mind nonetheless. Did he kill those people?
Most of them, yes. Jake, tell me what you know.
I spent the next few minutes connecting myself and telling Suma what happened from my point of view. After that, she told me what the dragon did with my body. She did not go into much detail, but she didn't have to. I'd gotten a pretty good look at the aftermath. The dragon, Danger, was brutal. Can you get me out of here now? There's something wrong with my body. It's as if I just went through 10 rounds of your healing, followed by 10 rounds of heavyweight boxer.
I still do not think it's a good idea, Jake. The city guards want you arrested. Do you feel as if you need medical treatment? If so, I'll summon you immediately. At that moment, I felt lightheaded, and despite remaining motionless, everything started to spin. I heard distorted voices, like they were underwater. They were slowly surfacing and growing clearer. I don't feel... Jake!
Suma shouted. With that, everything went dark. I expected to pass out, but instead, for a moment, it felt like I was waking up. My eyes opened, and I looked around. The only thing was, I wasn't the one who opened them, and I wasn't the one looking around. After what just happened, I started to panic, thinking maybe that the dragon had taken control of my body again. But it didn't feel anything like that. Instead, it felt more like I was dreaming. I'm hallucinating again. Now, I thought, emotions and thoughts started flowing like a river, as if I was the one actually thinking them, except I knew it wasn't me. It was a memory of some kind. I'm going to get such a sunburn, I thought. I would have shaken my head, but I didn't have one at that moment. The memory started with darkness, like a summoning spell. When my eyesight came back, there was a bird standing on the ground looking up at me. Did he say how long he was going to be? The person, who was probably Zachariah, asked the Niema.
He will arrive shortly. I do ask you be on your best behavior. This is not like our meetings with the royal court or even the king. Asham is a close friend of mine and a very important figure to the dragons. Please be courteous. The Niema, who was probably Ambrose, said. I'll be nice, probably Zachariah said. Thank you. Did your experiments with magic in your world go well?
Probably Ambrose asked. No, doesn't work there, at least not like it does here.
Perhaps if you improve your skill with it here, it'll become easier there.
I don't know. Maybe. Probably Zachariah's head turned to the side, and he looked around for a moment after hearing an odd noise. Do you hear that?
Hear what?
It sounds like something shaking a cloak out. Probably Amboss looked around for a moment, then nodded his head while looking off into the horizon.
Ah, yes. Here he comes now. He should not be much longer.
I guess that is your people's amazing sight.
As strong as your magic is, Zachariah, I still do not understand how a species could possibly get by with such poor eyesight.
Zachariah, I knew it, I thought. Axes and bows, Zachariah answered mockingly. Less than a minute later, the source of the strange noise became visible. It was 2 dragons, and the noise was one of their wing beats. They were both massive, but one was colossal, a dozen of times larger than the horse-sized drake I fought. It was an Eastern-style dragon with serpent-like body, long whiskers that made up a kind of beard shape, 4 legs with claws at the end, kinda like a cat, and a row of short fins down its back. I don't know how it was flying, probably magic, because it actually didn't have any wings. The smaller one was about 2/3 the size of the bigger one, and was a stereotypical Western-style dragon. It had 4 legs, huge wings, a long neck, a horned head, and a long tail. It looked more bestial in nature, where the larger one looked more refined. My Valhalla, Zachariah said once he realized how huge they were. Dang, that's big, I thought, just as amazed as he was. When the 2 dragons landed, the winged one kicked up dust storm and landed with a thud, while the wingless one slowly spiraled down until it landed fairly gently.
Greetings, Asham, and greetings to you as well, Deja,
the Niema said. Hello, Amboss. It is good to see you again. And you must be Zachariah. I have heard so much about you from Amboss, the larger Eastern-style dragon said, and lowered his massive head down closer to us. Greetings, Asham. It is a pleasure to meet you both, Zachariah said.
I did not realize Deja would be joining us today, but another dragon is always welcome, Amboss said.
The smaller Western dragon did not lower his head down to Amboss's or Zachariah's level, but he did speak. I was told your familiar had an impressive amount of negative ether. I was intrigued and asked Asham for permission to join him today. Deja was watching me, or Zachariah, very closely. His voice was raspy and shrill. It was definitely not what I expected to come out of such a powerful-looking body. I do, but I'm afraid I've got no talent for it, Zachariah said. Deja cocked his head and lowered it down closer to Zachariah's. Talent is overrated. I have always preferred skill gained through practical application. You are the only other being I have met with the ability to use negative ether. My name is Deja. It is a pleasure to meet you. End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 38. Jake's Point of View. Without warning, the area around me in the dream shifted like a heat haze over pavement, and I became aware of the passage of time. I somehow knew nearly a year had passed, maybe longer. Now we were in a coliseum of sorts, and Deja's darkly scaled head hung over and behind me, watching as Zachariah performed his spell. A small purple fire formed on the ground in front of Zachariah as the 2 looked on. You are improving. Your speed increases with each lesson, but let us see if it was successful, Deja said, and formed a ball of water with his own magic. He floated it into the fire, left it for a moment, then slowly brought it out again. I expected it to be smaller, but instead it had grown in size and was completely frozen solid.
Excellent work. I say you've mastered this technique. Your understanding of negative ether is impressive for only studying it for a single year, and it only took you a matter of months to learn the inversion method unique to negative mages.
A student is only as good as his teacher. Thank you, Deja, Zachariah said. Deja dropped the ball of ice to the ground, shattering it to pieces. The purple flames that Zachariah had been controlling slowly died down, turning a normal orange and yellow, until finally snuffing itself out.
Zachariah, may I ask you a question?
Deja asked, laying on the ground in front of Zachariah. In a way, he looked like a lion on the savannah in some old documentary or Disney movie. Despite laying down, his head still towered over me, or Zachariah, technically. What weighs in your mind? Zachariah asked, looking up at the dragon's head.
What is your opinion of Asham?
It reminds me of my Jarl, Sten, the leader of my people, Clan Harufram Bjorn.
In what way?
He is a dragon of heavy words and mighty ideals, but not one of swift action. Deja nodded his head.
I find myself agreeing with that.
But you didn't ask me because you wanted to hear my opinion, Zacharias said, putting his hands on his axe hilts, which hung on his hips.
Did I not?
Deja said, cocking his head. No, you asked me because you wanted to tell me your opinion of him. Deja chuckled.
Perhaps I did.
So what is your opinion of Asham? Deja inhaled deeply.
He is too sentimental. It has held us back.
In what way?
Our people should have left this world centuries ago, but Asham's sentimentality for these Nyama has kept us here.
Is it wrong to love this place, these people? This land is full of life. Why leave?
It is not wrong to love life, but...
Deja swung his massive head to the side and looked at the mountains in the distance.
I would hardly call this place alive.
I'm afraid I don't understand. What do you mean?
This world, it has grass and trees and beings to eat them, but they are mere facsimiles of life.
Zachariah looked around. It all looks real enough to me.
Tell me, Zachariah, do your people have the ability to sense aether?
Deja asked, looking down at Zachariah. No, although I am aware it is possible for the Nyama.
We dragons are also able to sense the aether, far more than them, and this world feels like the driest of deserts to me.
Deja moved his head closer to Zachariah.
You are alive with aether. It pours off of you, like it should pour off of all truly living beings. The Nyama, however, they are like wisps of bones left to dry out in the arid sands. The world you come from, Zachariah, it must have been so full of aether, so full of beauty.
Aye, it was beautiful. But I had never seen magic like this world as while I was there, Zachariah said. And to me, this world just looks as majestic. Deja snorted in response.
You should have seen this world when we first found it. It was a barren wasteland. We made it what it is today.
If you made this world, then why do you hate it?
I do not hate it. I feel no more for it than I would feel for one of the axes you craft. This world was an interesting experiment, but it is one that should have ended by now.
If you feel so strongly, then why not speak to Asham? Surely he would hear you, Zachariah said.
He would let me go. I am no one's captive here. However, he and all those loyal to him would stay, which would be most of the dragons.
Are there no more dragons out there?
There are, but just as you have your clan, I have mine.
So, you do not wish to leave your people, but you can't stay here any longer. Why not take the others who feel the same as you do and go home? Wait for the rest of your people to join you there.
If we go home without Asham, we may never find our way there. Only Asham knows the way.
Ah, I see, Zachariah said. As I watched this conversation, the haze reformed around me, and the memory shifted away again. Dang it, I thought. That was getting interesting. When the haze finally disappeared, I was in a new memory, and I think I was several years in the future from the last one. It was dark, and I could smell the sea. I was in a wooden room, slowly moving up and down. Am I in a boat? Zachariah was lying on a mat on the floor, but eventually he stood up and walked outside. There was no door. Instead, there was simply a circular opening large enough for a Nyama to fly through. But for Zachariah, it was a bit of a squeeze. Leaving the sleeping Nyama, Zachariah went to the top deck of the ship. I hadn't heard it before, but as we got closer to the deck, I heard the sounds of rain. I'd readied myself to get wet, but it was pointless. The rain wasn't hitting the ship. Small glowing runes on the floor were projecting a bubble that deflected the rain. Inside that bubble, Nyama flew around hurriedly, each to do some task.
Zachariah, what are you still doing up? Couldn't sleep?
A voice from above him called out. He turned and saw that it was Ambros, who softly landed on a pile of wooden boards left on the deck. I'm afraid not. My mind is racing with what's ahead, Zachariah said, leaning over the side of the ship. He stuck his hand outside the barrier and let the cold rain pour over his arm. Asham, dead. It almost seems impossible.
I do not wish to believe it myself, but the messenger was clear.
Why would Deja do this? I know he and Asham held their differences, but to kill one's Jarl, his friend, I do not understand.
Of all the dragons, Deja is the most incomprehensible.
I feel as if this were somehow my fault, that if I'd given him better advice or... I do not know.
Dager's actions, while villainous, were his own. You supported him as best you could. You must not take responsibility for his deeds.
My mind knows this, but my heart does not believe it. Zachariah shook his head and pulled his hand back from the rein. End of chapter. Book 2, Part 39. Jake's Point of View. The haze returned, flooding my field of view again. When it cleared, I was standing in the middle of a city, like an actual city. It was different from my world, but it was also unlike anything I'd ever seen in this one. In every Niama city I had seen so far, the buildings were sculpted like art. They were equally made from living materials and molded stone, but these were concrete. Sure, it had some artistic element. Some had runes engraved, others had flowers growing in small patches, but they were far from akin to what I was used to. They made good use of my people's runes, Zachariah said, admiring a fountain that used runes to flow the water around in the air. I'm surprised that your people took to them so quickly. His runes, I thought. What?
I admit, when you showed me this magic, I never believed that it would ever become this widespread,
Amboss said, fluttering alongside Zachariah, who was still watching the flow of the water.
It's impressive how versatile these runes are.
I only did it to see what would happen. I never expected it to work, Zachariah laughed, as he and Amboss left the fountain. Wait, what? I thought, shocked. Zachariah invented runes? So, Ashem's successor, what's he like? Zachariah asked.
I do not know. I've never met him before, although I am told he is quite young, Amboss answered. And I am not sure why, but apparently his ascension to Ashem is somehow controversial.
If you've never met him, and I've never met him, why did he ask to see us?
I assume it is because our relationship with the previous Ashem, or with...
Amboss stopped for a moment, then sighed.
With the Chaos Dragon.
It's a strange thing to take a man's, or rather a dragon's name from him as the punishment. Names have power, taking them away is a punishment.
Amboss flew over and landed on Zachariah's shoulder, then looked up at the sky.
They're here. Zachariah looked up and saw in the distant sky 3 figures. They were silhouetted in the sky, 2 large serpentine shadows on either side of a much smaller winged shadow. I expected them to land like last time, where the winged one landed hard and the serpent one landed gracefully, but instead they all spiraled down towards a soft landing. The winged Western-style dragon was small, very small for a dragon actually. It was the same height as Zachariah, though clearly larger than other aspects. Its body was broad and its wings made it look even more so. The smaller dragon was a pale green color, and the 2 larger ones were both shades of grey, the darker and lighter accents on their bodies and heads.
Greetings, I take it that you're Amboss and Zachariah?
The little dragon asked in a young-sounding voice. We are. I am Amboss. This is Zachariah. May we assume that you are Ashem?
I am.
The dragon, Ashem, bowed its head, spreading its wings. Amboss did the same. Even Zachariah kneeled, which surprised me, because I didn't know that was something Vikings did. Ashem, please remember your position, one of the larger dragons protested as he bowed.
Show respect to the trusted allies of my predecessor supersedes normal formalities, Ashem said.
The larger Eastern-style dragon sighed. Your kindness is appreciated, but your attendant may be right. I disagree. It is a wise leader who can humble himself when he sees fit, Zachariah said.
You speak the truth, Zachariah, a truth my predecessor took to heart as well. Lord Ashem, may I ask why you summoned us here today? Is there some sort of problem, or do you need assistance? Amboss interrupted. Straight to the point. You are as we described to me many times, Amboss. I apologize for any rudeness, Lord Ashem. No need. I value directness.
Dang, this kid's more mature than half my co-workers back on Earth, I thought to myself.
If you will be direct, then so shall I. My ascension has been difficult, and there are many who wish it to not have happened. I would like your support in the future regarding my decisions with the Chaos Dragon.
What decisions? Zachariah asked bluntly.
To leave,
Ashem answered, just as he filled my view again. Vic this, I groaned, annoyed that I haven't been able to properly finish a single memory. Oh! I was suddenly overcome with pain, emanating from my arm. The haze faded again, and I was surrounded by fire, looking up at the Chaos Dragon, Left behind, he roared. Did you expect anything less? Zachariah asked, glancing down at his arm, which was covered in blood and burns. However, it was healing quickly, faster than even Suma's healing magic. Beside Zachariah was an unconscious and blood-stained Amboss. Deja looked around at the burning forest that surrounded us. They left me behind to be forgotten. He raised a claw towards the trees and extinguished the fires with magic. But if my brethren refuse to remember me, I will ensure this land will. Without lowering his claw, he started casting a spell. A purple cloud poured out of him and engulfed the trees. It left a purplish-silver coating on them, which was absorbed rapidly by them. What was that? What did you do? Zachariah asked. Made a memorial, the dragon answered, spread his wings and flew away, picking up Amboss. Zachariah turned around and ran towards the nearby city at the edge of the previously burning forest. By the time he arrived, Amboss was starting to wake up.
Zachariah?
Amboss, are you okay?
I felt better, but what happened? Did the dragons...
Yes, they left at Miria after their portal closed. Deja appeared and laid waste to everything. He did something to the sacred forest, then flew away.
Which way?
Northwest.
The settlement.
Amboss said, upset. Probably.
But there is nothing left there. What could he be after?
I don't think he's after anything but revenge now.
His own son led the dragons away, left him behind, and even ordered an attempted assassination on him. Who knows what he'll do now?
He and I are a lot alike. I think I know what he'll do.
What?
He'll go raiding.
To what end?
To the end of everything, Zachariah said. Amboss looked at his injured chest and wings, then cast a healing spell on himself.
We need to go to the settlement.
You want to fight him?
He's not going to give us much of a choice. He attacked the sacred forest, just killed dozens of your people, and who knows what he plans to do next, Zachariah said, setting Amboss down, then standing back to his feet. 2 mages cannot beat a dragon, especially not a master of negative aether. We need an army. Then let's go ask the king for one. Jake!
Suma's voice screamed loudly, breaking my memory and waking me up. The next thing I knew, I was in a stone room tied down by vines, with several Niema and their familiars around me. End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 40. Jake's Point of View. As I looked around, realizing I was actually able to control my body, and that I was awake, it became very clear that I was not in a good situation. Familiar Sentinel, you stand accused of violating royal decree and illegally using the forbidden death magic to kill several members of the Queen's royal mages. One large and bright blue female Niema said, loudly. She was perched next to another Niema who was surrounded by several large familiars, the Queen herself.
Jake, are you injured?
Suma asked, over our private connection. She sounded very worried. Yeah. I'm sore, but I think I'm okay.
Does the defense have any opening statements before the memory delve begins? The large female Niema asked. A voice I think I recognized spoke up from behind me. I would like to remind the court that we have already proven by a voluntary memory delve performed on Lady Suma and myself that the mages that were killed illegally attacked my team first, killing several members of my squadron. What took place was justified self-defense, not murder. Is that the captain who was with us? I asked Suma. Yes. He survived the attack and offered to operate as our legal defense.
I'm on trial, I asked. My brain finally started to catch up with a sudden shift.
Unfortunately.
What happens if we lose?
Suma stayed quiet for a moment. We may both be executed, or worse.
When she said that, my first instinct was to try and break out of the vines that were holding me in place. I jerked against them, trying to get free, but they barely budged. The female Niema next to the Queen must have noticed, because she spoke up. Those bindings have been reinforced with magic and were created specifically to hold physically powerful familiars. Even one as strong as you will not be able to escape them, and should you attempt to use your magic to break the bindings, the 4 royal mages around you will not hesitate to kill you. Jake, please do not fight them, the captain said. Just cooperate and this will be all over soon. I thought about it for a moment, sighed, and relaxed.
Good. With all parties now present, we will begin the memory delve,
the Niema said, and several others flew over and landed beside my head. They started to perform the ritual, but this time I noticed something different. There was a large crystal ball-looking thing near the Queen, and when the ritual started, it began to glow. What's that? I asked Suma, out loud this time, nodding towards the ball.
It is a magical device that will allow everyone to see the memories in question, she answered. a viewing crystal. Familiar Sentinel, you will answer every question asked you to the best of your abilities. And without lies. Do you understand? The Queen said. I do. Good. Then we will begin.
Sentinel, did you utilize death magic? The female Niema asked.
No.
Lies! A voice to my right shouted, but was silenced by the Queen. She looked at one of the Niema performing the ritual next to me.
I see no memories of the event in question, Your Majesty, the Niema said.
And I cannot find any evidence of tampering with his mind, said another.
We saw the battle during the memory delves of Lady Suma and the other survivors,
the angry voice said, but not as loudly this time. Sentinel, can you explain this? Did you alter the memory in some way? The Queen asked, confused. I didn't attack anyone, Queen Umpera. My body was being controlled, I said, looking up at the Queen from the floor. She turned the crystal ball and watched it as memories from my conversation with Zachariah in the void played. Actually, everyone was watching that crystal intently.
What is this? Who?
When Zachariah and Daja's name, the Queen lost all of her glittering glow, and all of her feathers pressed down to her body. She and everyone else continued to watch the crystal until the end of the memory played, and Zachariah and Daja reformed back into a single being. Hey, dragon! Someone behind me yelled. The room filled with confused and panicked voices until the Queen silenced everyone.
Enough!
She shouted, and a large pylon that I hadn't seen hidden behind her throne magically lifted into the air before slamming itself down with a crash. The room fell dead quiet in an instant.
The memory delve is over. Everyone get out, she declared.
Your Majesty, an angry voice from earlier asked, Out! With that, a dozen Niema I hadn't seen behind me at all flew out of the room, leaving only Suma, me, and the Queen, as well as her guards. Even the female Niema next to the Queen and the captain left.
Sentinel, that dragon, do you know who he was?
Yes, Queen Impera, and I guess you do too. She didn't answer me, but instead her eyes began to glow, as well as the eyes of all the guards in the room that I could actually see.
Jake, what do you mean? I do not understand. You meant a dragon. Is this not a reason to celebrate?
Suma asked, confused and slightly worried over our private connection. That was the Chaos Dragon, I answered. Her glow vanished just as the Queen's had, and I felt her emotions as she became very worried. I looked around, and one by one each of the guards was starting to look worried as well. The Queen's eyes stopped glowing.
Sentinel, tell us about these memories that this flaming figure Zachariah mentioned.
I explained the memories I had seen, about how Zachariah and Daja met, and everything else. They listened closely, occasionally asking questions.
Why not continue the memory delve? You could see everything for yourselves,
Suma pointed out after a few minutes of talking.
This matter is sensitive. A memory delver is not to be trusted with it. Not yet, anyway, the Queen said. Please, Sentinel, continue.
I resumed explaining, and after about 15 minutes, I had told them everything I had seen up until I was summoned here. A heavy silence fell over the room again as the Queen's eyes resumed their glow.
Jake,
Suma said through our connection,
does this mean that you cannot return to your home?
Yeah, I said, the reality of that finally dawning on me. Oh man, my mama's gonna freak out. Oh, frick, I said, and felt my heart starting to race. I can't breathe, I said out loud, starting to panic. The vines suddenly felt like they would choke me. I was getting claustrophobic. I can't breathe! That drew the attention of everyone in the room.
Jake,
Suma asked, not sure what was happening. Loosen his restraints, the Queen ordered. The vines that were holding me in place loosened, and in my panic state I started pulling them again. In hindsight, I was probably having a panic attack. I struggled against the vine, but unlike before, they didn't feel as strong. My right arm broke free, and immediately I started pulling the vines off my head and neck as well.
He broke his restraints,
one of the guards shouted, sounding confused. Hold! Do not attack him, the Queen shouted, as some of the guards in the room began casting spells. At this point, my breathing was ragged and heavy. I don't remember when, but at some point, I'd started sobbing. End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 41, Jake's Point of View. I heard somewhere once that crying helps your brain release and process emotions, and that's why you don't feel them as strongly after you cry. What a load of crock. I didn't feel any better by the time I was finished, just numb, empty, and tired. After I broke down, Suma and I were moved to another room. The Queen came in, followed by 3 others. She talked to Suma, and I listened, sort of. By the end of it, their voices were more like background noise to me as I thought about my mum. What's Mum gonna think? She'll think I'm dead, I thought to myself. She's gonna come into my room, see it empty, and worry. She probably... Man, she'll freak out. What if she goes faint or falls and I'm not there? What if she dies while I'm trapped here? What if...
Jake?
My spiraling thoughts were interrupted by Suma, and I snapped back to reality. What? I asked. My voice cracked and broke like dropped glass.
Are you okay?
She asked, concerned. I hadn't noticed it, but I was gripping the vines that I was sitting on so hard that they had splintered. My hands, well, really my whole body, was lightly shaking, and my breathing had gotten heavier again. I don't, I took a deep breath and dropped the splinters from my uneasy hands. I'm fine. Suma's point of view. After being led to a private room, Queen Umpera wanted to talk with us a while longer. However, I believe she actually wished to ask them of Jake, but he was still unable to answer any questions. Of all of us, these events had been the hardest on him. He was used as a weapon, placed on trial, lost control of his mind and body, and had his family, his whole world, stolen from him. Instead, the Queen asked her questions to me, while Jake silently listened, although I suspect he was not. At one point during my conversation with the Queen, Jake had begun breathing heavily again, and even damaged the vine perch I made for him to rest on. When I asked him how he was, he clearly lied and said he was fine.
Lady Suma, Sir Sentinel, I need to know what your plans are for the future.
Your Majesty, I truly do not know, I said. There was a moment of quiet, and just as I looked at the Queen was going to speak again, Jake said something instead. I'm gonna kill him. When he said this, the guards and their familiars looked on edge. What? I asked, surprised. I'm gonna kill Deja, Jake said again. His voice sounded different, colder, more intense than I was used to hearing. It didn't sound like it did in the desert, though, when he was being controlled. Then he sounded joyful, even while killing all those mages. But now, it was the hours before the big storm.
Killing the Chaos Dragon, Queen Umpera said, is tantamount to impossible. Not even Ambos himself was able to do it.
As powerful as you are, Jake, he is a dragon. It will not be so simple, I said. He was silent for a moment. Then I'll go back to trading, back to the army, or I'll stay here in the royal court and train. I don't care.
The dragons are powerful beings whose magic surpassed even the greatest mages from their era. Their spells, once used to subjugate rogue dragons, were lost during the Queen tried to explain, but Jake cut her off. I don't care. Hold your words, Asher, one of the Queen's guards yelled. Enough,
Queen Umpera said calmly.
Sir Sentinel, how would you kill him? Where is he? Have you considered these questions?
The guard's puffed feathers lowered slightly, but he was still obviously upset. I don't know, but I think he's near Dragon's Hoard Mountain, Jake said. I was surprised.
What?
Why do you think that he's in the country? The Queen wondered. Something he once said. When we were in the last time I saw him, and he said that I was standing on his head. I'd been wondering about it for a while, and I'm still not sure. But I think, maybe.
It was said that site was once the home to a long-forgotten dragon, but it has been empty since the Chaos Dragon's rampage, the Queen said.
I never heard of that, I said, confused.
It's a well-protected secret in the royal family.
Why?
To keep the temple's power in check. Having a massive site of religious importance so close to a major city, and so far from the royal sphere of influence is dangerous.
It isn't empty. There are creatures living deep inside, Jake said.
Inside?
She asked. Yes, large reptiles. We found them when we were training on the mountain, I added.
I've not heard of these creatures, but no one has gone inside the mountain in centuries.
She turned to one of the guards.
Go and check the archives. See if you can find anything related to reptilian creatures inside of Dragon's Hoard.
Yes, Your Highness, the guard said, sent away his familiar, opened the hole in the wall, and flew away.
Well, assuming that the Chaos Dragon is truly in Dragon's Hoard somehow, that still leaves the issue of actually killing him,
the Queen said. Zachariah fought him, so did Ambos. If they could do it, then so can we.
Both of them lived in an era when even the standard mage would have been considered powerful and skilled enough to be recognized as a middle-class or even a high-class mage. Ambos himself was said to possess magic stronger than even royal mages do now. It would take years for you to reach that level, the Queen said.
Zachariah already thought of that.
Do you mean the memories?
I asked, and Jake nodded his head. He said that the memories he put in me could teach me how to use chaos magic. Maybe he included more than that, though.
Do you think he also gave you a way to kill the Chaos Dragon?
The Queen asked. I would, if it were me. Queen Umpera was quiet for a moment.
Awakening the dragon could prove dangerous. Is he not awake and trying to come back? I asked. He attempted to do so through Jake, but what is stopping him from using anyone else?
He has not tried anyone else. Perhaps it is only your familiar that allows it to be possible.
Maybe.
Maybe he needs someone with mana as useful as his was, Jake suggested. There are no Niema with mana that powerful, and familiars with mana like that are practically non-existent.
Jake is the only one I have ever heard of with such a powerful mana. Not even the lesser dragons like drakes, salamanders, and Vyrams possess anything close, I said.
It would seem, Sir Sentinel,
that you are necessary for the dragon's return,
the Queen said, sounding very serious.
Thinking logically, killing you could ensure my kingdom's safety.
The guards at her side looked tense. Their familiars began baring their fangs, and they all looked as if they were ready to fight. I could feel my heart beating in my wingtips as I looked over at Jake. He stared coldly at the Queen, glancing occasionally at the guards. The tension in the room felt as if it would choke me. Queen Umpera broke the silence.
But what stops any other Niema from any other country doing the same as Lady Suma did, and summoning another Viking?
So, will you help us? Jake asked.
Yes, you have my full support,
Queen Umpera said, as I finally started breathing again. End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 42. Jake's Point of View. I was sitting in a room the Queen prepared for me in her castle, while talking to Suma over our private connection.
I am arriving now. Would I summon you?
She asked. Suma had spent the last few days traveling with escorts, and the captain she arrived at the capital with, Captain Rizoan, back to the base. No, not yet. There are still a few things I want to do here first, and who knows when I'll be here next, I said.
How is your training going?
She asked, knowing that I needed to do everything I could to prepare. The Queen set up sparring matches between me and some of the royal mages at my request. It hurts, and I haven't won a single time, but I think I'm getting the feel for how Niema fight. Between my fight with Lieutenant Datahu and these guys, I've noticed a few things.
Such as?
I noticed you're all a lot better at three-dimensional combat than me. In the air, I can't hit anything. I've been trying to think of ways to knock Niema out of the air or slow their movements down.
I see,
Suma said hesitantly.
Jake, how have you been these last few days?
I'm fine, I said.
You have not spent too much time training, have you?
I've only had a few days here. I needed every second I could get.
Jake,
I'm fine, I repeated, then changed the subject quickly. How has your journey been?
Uneventful, thank the dragons. Flying through the wastelands is as bad as it was last time, however. Did you find out what you were looking for in the Queen's archives?
Nothing useful, and not a word of those reptile things.
Ah, so. Either one has never encountered one of these echoes before, or no one lived to tell anyone, Suma said.
Probably.
Are you ready, Sir Sentinel?
A voice from behind me asked. I looked behind me and saw 3 Niema landing. Yeah, I answered. Suma, I gotta go. It's time for the delve.
All right, please contact me afterwards, she said, still sounding concerned.
I will, I said.
Please lay down here.
The Niema, who I noticed lacked their normal glitter, just like my teammate 9, said, gesturing to a magic circle he was creating. I laid down on my back and took a deep breath. I was about to undergo a spell that would help me control when the memories given to me by Zachariah would appear. For my training, I need to be able to access them whenever I need, and not just randomly. The other 2 Niema joined him, and the magic circle tripled in size.
Are you ready?
He asked. Yeah. Then we will begin. In unison, they began to cast a spell. It took them about a minute to finish. A long, quiet minute. Once they did, I felt a tingle inside my skull, followed by a few seconds of dizziness.
We are finished,
the Niema said. I sat up at the dizzy feeling, and the tingle went away. When will I know if it worked?
You should be able to find the memories now. Feel free to try it at any time, although I do recommend lying down when you do so.
I nodded my head and thanked him. With that, they left my room. I laid down on the vine bed again, closed my eyes, and tried to see one of the memories. I need to find something about fighting, I thought. With that, I started to see moments in time flash through my mind, but they were moving too fast to see clearly. I need something about fighting Niema, I tried again, more specifically this time. Once again, memories filled my mind, but much more slowly this time. I looked through them like I was swiping on my phone until I find one that kind of felt right. Focusing on it, I was brought into a memory, as if it were just like any other time. I was still locked into Zachariah's point of view, and I still didn't have any control over what happened. But now I could control when they happened. Finally, some good news. It is an impressive weapon, the voice of Amber said from outside my field of view. My aim needs improvement, Zacharias said, and wrenched an arrow free from the far right side of the wooden target. He turned and walked back to Ambos, who was perched on a wooden post. Strangely, the post looked manlike, not like something the Nyama would build. Why not simply use magic for your ranged attacks? I'm not as good with magic as you are yet, Zacharias said, and slung the bow over his back. Your, what did you call it? Runes suggest otherwise. Runes cannot be used to kill an enemy. Why not? Ambrose asked. Because, I felt something touch Zacharias' chin and lip. How would that? I already know how to use runes, I thought, and started to end the memory before getting an idea. But how are they made? Once again, I sifted through the memory, searching for one about making runes. It took a moment, but I found it. The environment shifted again like a heat haze over concrete, and I was suddenly sitting at a table full of dice, clay, scrolls, and stone working tools. What are you making? Ambos asked. Varthok runes. Before we go to battle, I want to make a spell of protection for us. I've never heard of these runes. What are they? The language of my people. We write our desires into the stone, and they lay inside of the earth, makes the desire come forth. You mentioned that your people's magic was different. May I watch? I can make you one as well, my friend, if you want it. Yes, please, Ambos answered. Zachariah pulled one of the scrolls and some dice towards him. I'll make yours on parchment so that it is lighter. We can tie it to your leg before the battle. Zachariah dipped a blue quill in the ink and drew on the scroll. This rune means strength. He finished and moved to another spot on the scroll. And this one is body. He drew a line connecting the runes at both their tops and bottoms. When they are connected, they will give you strength in combat. How do I use this spell? You mentioned something called a lay. Magic does work differently here. Their lay seems to be all around us in your world. Perhaps some of your magic would make it work better, Zachariah suggested. Ambos nodded his head and placed a wingtip on the rune. A moment later, the rune was glowing faintly red. Fascinating, Ambos said. I've never seen this before. Should we tie it to you? Ambos agreed, and Zachariah tied it to him with a small string. The glittering white sparkle Ambos once had was replaced by what was a bright red one. And with that, the memory ended. His language, or runes, just writing. End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 43. Jake's Point of View. With that revelation in mind, I pulled myself out of the memory and woke up, sliding out of the vine bed. I used magic to open the room back up and spotted one of the guards that was posted outside my room. Hey, I said to the guard, can you get me something? What? The guard asked, sounding confused. I want to try making a rune, and I need some materials. You have a rune maker's permit, the Niema said from his perch, his head tilted slightly to the side. No? I didn't know I needed one. It is illegal to create runes without a permit. It is a dangerous profession, he explained, although I do not expect a familiar to know this, let alone actually be able to make one. Even an Asha should know that. Break off, I said, rolling my eyes and closing my room in a smug-sounding jerk's face as hard as I could. Although really, I was just slightly louder than slurping and crackling sounds as the rock wall and vines reformed. Fine, I can probably make some stuff myself, I thought. Sitting on the floor, I summoned my backpack and started looking through it. Inside were a few gold coins, a spare dull jar, and a broken rune-inscribed rock I got from boot camp that I keep forgetting about. Over 50 meters of rope and an emergency medical kit, but not one piece of paper. I guess that's too much to ask, I thought. Of course, even if I did have it, I wouldn't use it for the runes. I'd write my mum a letter. Breaking myself out of those thoughts before I started to spiral again, I instead picked up the rock and looked it over. Inside the grooves where the runes had been was a sticky residue, probably the remnants of clay, or rather, it was the rune that was originally made using. Not enough, I murmured. For a second, I considered using the magic to melt the rock and turn it into clay. But since I didn't know what it was made of, or what clay was made of, atomically, I couldn't imagine it working. Rather than risk punching a hole in an atom, I put everything back into my backpack before sending it away, and decided just to go ask the Queen directly for both permission and materials. While I was staying in her castle, I was granted free roam to the place, so long as the guard was with me. and I was allowed to see her as needed, either by her request or mine. We'd met 4 times already since Suma left, and talked about various things. She wanted to know more about my world, and I wanted to know as much about hers as I could. Suma knew quite a bit about her country, but the Queen definitely knew more. I opened the room again and walked towards the Queen's court to ask for an audience with her. As I did, the guard spoke up again. Back for some wait. Where are you going? Get back here! You can't just... Stop! He shouted, getting annoyed, and started fluttering behind me as I walked. I smirked. No, you follow. Where do you think you're going? To ask to see the Queen. The arrogance! You have taken up too much of Her Majesty's time already. Instead of replying, I ignored him and continued walking. What are you doing? Are you not going to say anything? What would a predator like me have to say to you? I asked sarcastically. Predator? He asked, confused. That's what you called me, right, Asher? He laughed. Is that what your master told you that meant? Yes, but I'm sure you'll correct it. I had figured Suma and Selakar, the Niema who put the runes on my weapons and armor, and told me what it meant originally, had given me a watered-down translation. It means the beast who eats you and enjoys every moment, the annoying guard said, and spite and cruelty dripping from his fat, snobbish beak. Did I do something to you? I asked. You killed Niema and flew away without ever touching the ground, he said, sounding genuinely angry this time. At that point, I stopped walking and faced him in time to see him landing on a perch a few meters away. You killed all those court mages. That wasn't me. Oh, I heard the lies. But those weren't the first Niema you killed, were they? He said. I stayed quiet, remembering what happened in the alley that day. Years ago, you killed the magistrate's son, tortured him to death. That's not what happened, I denied. You used death magic, and the Grand Duke covered it up. Everyone just turned their feathers away because they think you'll be useful in the war. But I know what you really are. Shut up, I said angrily. You're a killer, a monster, a Viking. I turned and walked away without another word. He didn't bother following me. After 15 minutes of walking around and trying to calm myself down, I made it to the Queen's court. There was a Niema in the room, basically the castle's chief gardener, I guess, using magic to fix and rearrange the decorations on the pillar and walls. He came here every day to do it, so I had seen and spoken to him a few times. Hey, I said. Oh, greetings, Sentinel. He bowed and spread his wings. I told him a few times he didn't need to do that, but he insisted. How can I help you? Can I speak with the Queen about getting some materials for making a rune? I also probably need permission to make one, since I don't have a permit. I shall inform Her Majesty's attendants immediately. I thanked him, and he flew through one of the holes in the roof. While he was gone, I started thinking about what the guards said, despite the fact that I was trying not to. My mind was wandering, so I didn't notice when 2 Niema, one of which was a gardener, and the other one was the Queen's personal attendants, fly up and land beside me, startling me when I suddenly heard flapping sounds from behind my back. Greetings, Sentinel. Queen Umpera sends her apologies, but she's unable to meet with you today. However, she was made aware of your requests and has granted the use of materials and permission to craft a rune under the supervision of myself. The attendant, whose name was Cisco von Sopra, said. Okay, sounds good to me, I said, and nodded my head. Then I had another thought. Can I get a different guard? End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 44. Jake's Point of View. Back in my room, several Niema were finally delivering material so that I could try making a rune, under the supervision of one of the Queen's attendants, Talek Sopra, who was apparently a distant relative to the Grand Duke. The materials included a few scraps of leather to place the runes on, clays, dyes, some containers to mix things in, a dull jar for storing mana, and a special siphon for mixing the mana into the clay. This should be everything we need. Are you ready to begin, Sir Sentinel? Talek asked. I picked up the dull jar and started putting some mana into it. I'm ready. Within half a minute, the dull jar was full. I'd heard your mana capacity was quite large, but you filled that dull jar in mere moments, Talek said, impressed. Don't you see the royal mages all the time? I can't imagine that it's that impressive, I wondered. True, but they do possess large capacities as well. But even they take several minutes to fill a dull jar. I wonder, do you know your life force density? I used to, but I forgot. It was over 100 kemmer or something, I said, attaching a siphon to the filled Dal jar. I haven't had it measured in a couple of years. Zuma might remember. I can ask her if you want. I would appreciate that, he said. I contacted Zuma over our private connection, and she remembered. She said that it was 500 kalma and around 60 dalma. Meant my mana reservoir was over 900, but she couldn't remember exactly. I was actually wondering, could I remeasure it? If it has been several years, it may have increased due to your trading, Tadek asked. Sure, I guess. Can I wait until after this, though? Of course. Let us continue. Have you properly attached the siphon? I held up the Dal jar with the siphon on top. He shook his head slightly. It's on backwards. Oh, I corrected the siphon and held it up again. Would you like me to put it on? He asked. I sighed and put it in front of him. Using magic, he turned the siphon, and I leaned in slightly to the side. I heard a clicking noise, and he gently set the Dal jar back down. Have you ever made runes before? He asked hesitantly. No, but I've seen it done. A Niema called Selakar showed me, and I also have memories of Zachariah doing it. All right, then please show me what you know, Tadek said, flapping his wings a few times and flying to a perch above where I was working. Runes are effectively writing, I think. So I was just going to mix some dyes up and write. I stopped and realized the problem. Oh yeah, nothing to write with. You cannot simply write a rune onto leather. The ink will not stay in place. You must embed the inks and dyes into the hide, Talar said. Oh yeah, I thought. Writing on parchment and paper are super different. You have to basically tattoo the ink into place on leather. Here is a tool you can use, Tadek said, and used magic to levitate a small scalpel thing to me. Thanks. Start by mixing mana from the Dal jar into the ink and dyes. Okay, how do I do that? Place the materials of your choice into the siphon, then seal it. It will immediately begin the mana infusion, he said. I picked up a bowl of ink and poured some of it into the siphon, then closed the metal lid. Immediately, an ear-piercing super high-frequency sound started screaming from the siphon. Ah, frack! I yelled and covered my ears, but it didn't help much. What is wrong? Talik asked, surprised. You could have mentioned the noise, I yelled, trying to be louder than the siphon. What noise? He asked, confused. You can't hear that. I hear nothing. Suddenly, the siphon stopped and glowed a faint red. Ah, it is finished. Thank goodness, I said, opening the lid and pouring the ink into a bowl. Talik spent a few minutes explaining how to use the scalpel thing, and then I got started. The word I chose was cold. It seemed simple, and I didn't want to accidentally burn anything down. Once I was finished, Talik looked it over. This does not look like any rune I know, he said, sounding worried, with his head tilting slightly. None of the symbols are even connected. I doubt it'll work. I don't think it will either, but I want to try, I said, and laid the leather strip I had been tattooing for the last hour and a half on the ground. What is the rune's intended function? It is to test to see if it works, but hopefully it'll become cold. Touching the letters, I tried to activate them, but nothing happened. Didn't think so, I muttered. You will need to connect the symbols, otherwise the mana cannot flow properly, Tadek said, and I got back to work. Another 10 minutes later, all the letters were connected, like cursive. How's that? I asked. Oh, that is an unusual pattern, but it should work. Once again, I touched the letters and tried to activate them. This time, it worked, sort of. Hot! I yelped and jerked my hand away. Thankfully, there was no visible burn on my hand. But I still cast a spell to make a water ball and stuck my fingers in it. Ah! I sighed. Looking back at the makeshift rune, I saw that the only thing left of it was a smouldering strip of charred leather. Right! Forgot about that, I said, remembering the inversion thing. It's been so long since it happened, it slipped my mind. Your symbols were not precise enough. After an hour of preparing materials and tattooing another piece of leather, this time with more specific instructions, I was ready to try again. And will this rune become very hot from your cold as well? Talik asked, chuckling. Hopefully not. This one is more specific. It says, make this leather strip freeze solid. I told him and placed it on the floor. Do you want to activate it for me? My mana is inversion, so it won't work right if I do it. You must test your own runes. Use the Dal jar itself to activate the rune if you must, Tadek said. Never mind the fact that I would rather not visit a healing mage today. I faked a laugh and summoned my backpack again. Then I got my spare Dal jar out. Once it was filled up, I touched the tip of it to the rune and activated it. Thankfully, mana is stripped of its natural properties once it enters the dull jar, so it worked as expected. I touched the leather strip carefully and jerked my hand back suddenly when I felt something. "It's cold!" I exclaimed excitedly. Picking it up, I realized that it was as hard as a rock. "It worked," I said, and tapped the frozen strip against the stone wall with several loud clinking sounds. "An excellent second attempt, I must say. I've not seen such odd runes, but they seem to work well. Congratulations." "Thanks. I want to try a few more things, but this is cool," I said, unintentionally making a pun. "When I get back to base, I think I'm going to do a few more experiments." "You'll need a rune maker's permit for that. Her Majesty only gave permission for you to learn while you were under supervision." Talek thought for a moment. "However, you could start officially taking classes while on base. It would take some time, but many Niema receive rune maker's permits while serving in Her Majesty's Royal Army." I nodded my head. "I'll think about it, but I'm done for now. Besides, I need to go home soon anyway. Suma has been waiting for hours." "I see. Do you still have time for me to test your life force density?" Talek asked. "Yeah, sure. And I want to say goodbye to the Queen Emperor as well." "All right, then. Please follow me," Talek said. With that, we left the room. End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 45. Queen Emperor's Point of View. My kingdom, my people, my family are all under threat. War with the Southern Union has killed countless of our soldiers, risked our solidarity, lost our territory, ravaged our farmlands, and put centuries-old treaties under scrutiny. The only thing that kept my kingdom together for a time was my father, the previous king, and when he died, I feared that I would lose everything. Until he came, the familiar of a middle-class mage, Jake the Sentinel. In less than a month, he took down one of my father's biggest obstacles and ended their noble house's influence. With the backing of Grand Duke Sopra, the way for me to take the throne from my family members was opened. At first, I surmised that it was a mere coincidence, and that I should simply be grateful for the opportunity. So I granted him a pardon for any crimes he had committed while doing it, and left it be. I never expected him to join the military, or the Wyverns, or to be a Viking. The familiar who had given me the opportunity to save my kingdom from my foolish family was now the most dangerous thing that I had ever seen. I orchestrated an inquiry with my royal court and his master, also that I might see him for myself. I later regretted that decision when one of my brother's supporters bribed members of the court to kill the familiar. But their foolish mistake allowed for greater insight into the threat, and for one more opportunity. "Your Majesty, I have performed the measurements as you requested," my attendant Talek said as he flew into the room and landed on a golden perch beside my roost. He sounded distressed. "The results?" I asked. We were currently in my private chambers, which had a special runes engraved into the walls to prevent anyone from hearing what was discussed. "It is as you feared. His abilities have increased from our last report, given by a researcher Selakar." "By how much?" "Sentinel's new life force density is 600 Kalma and 93 Dalma. His mana reservoir has also increased to 1007. In less than 3 years, he has achieved the same growth as most Niema strive their whole lives for," I said, and took a deep, calming breath. "Your Majesty, did you get a good look at him?" Talek asked. He was talking about Mana Gaze, an ability only some members of the royal family and the highest class of mages could use. It is an ability gifted to us by the dragons that allows one to physically see the mana one possesses. "I did. During the interview with the royal court, the image was disturbing." "In what way?" "Surrounding him was a purple and blue miasma. It poured off his body like a waterfall. To me, it looked as if he were a living mass of mana." "Do the records of the Vikings' rampage match what you saw?" "Yes. According to the records, Jake has roughly the same amount of mana as Hell." Was it wise to spare him, if he's such a threat?" Talek asked, shaken. "For now. But if the rumors from the front lines and the reports of Dager's potential awakening are true, we will need him." There was a moment of silence as we both thought. Then I broke it. "How did the experiments with runes go?" "Very well, Your Majesty. He learned the basics and even developed new rune symbols and a new method of weaving them." Talek sounded excited. He was always loved rune smithing and rune craft. It was a Viking who originally created them, so I should not be surprised. That is the end of my report, Your Majesty, Tarek said, and bowed. Then you are dismissed. Have a good night, Tarek. He bid me a good night and flew out. Glancing over to a small silver statue of my father, which I created after his passing and kept in my chambers, I wondered what he would do in my position. Would he worry more about the rumors from the front lines of the war, the dragon's return, or the Vikings in our midst? A monster, a Viking, a war, and a chaos dragon, I said to myself aloud, but did not finish the thought. End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 46. Jake's Point of View. After letting Talek measure me, I visited the Queen one last time and said goodbye. Thank you for your hospitality, Queen Ampera, I said, bowing down to her in her throne room. I hope that you have found the answers you needed from my family's archives during your stay. Yes, ma'am, well, most of it, but I think I got everything there was to find. If you ever wish to return, please do. Thank you, Your Majesty. Well then, I guess it's time for me to go, I said, and started standing up. I had told Sima what I was doing before the meeting, so that she would be ready to summon me. All I needed to do was call her. Hold one moment, Sentinel, the Queen said. I want you to understand something. Yes, whether it is fair or right, I do not know, but you have become the most important person in this kingdom in a matter of days. Possibly the whole world, she said. I don't know if that's I tried to say, but you cut me off. It is, I assure you. And for your own protection, I suggest you keep our arrangement, our meetings, and this matter with danger to yourself. I already informed Lady Suma before her departure, and now I am telling you, for your own sake, tell no one of what has happened during your visit here. At least nothing regarding the dragon, Queen Ampera said seriously. Thinking for a moment, I agreed. I understand. Suma and I won't say a word. She nodded and dismissed me. With that, I called Suma, and she summoned me back to our base. As the darkness of the summoning spell overtook me, I held my breath, and my heart pounded like a drum. For what felt like minutes, I hung in the void, expecting to see him again. But he never showed up. Reappearing back at the base, I let out a sigh of relief. Welcome home, Suma said. It's weird, those two simple words really hurt. I looked around and realized that I was in the room that had been assigned to me a few weeks ago. It was smaller than I remember. Thanks, I said sadly. I guess this is home for now, I thought to myself. Did anything happen while I was away? No, but we do have our first patrol duty tomorrow, and our first in-field exercises, Suma said. You should get some rest before then. Nah, I said, looking around the cramped room, still littered with vines I had been neglecting to clean. I'd rather go say hi to everyone first. All right, then. Our team is in the pit gambling over sparring matches. Suma flew up and landed on my shoulder. While we walked, I told her about the rune experiment I ran. She seemed interested, but also confused. We were just arriving at the pit by the time I finished explaining, but I couldn't see the team. Where is everyone? I wondered. Up there, Suma said, motioning with a wing towards the perches near the top of the dome around the pit. Also, I was told by the Queen to keep what happened a secret, so they do not know that we were attacked by the court. I told them that our mission went as planned, but that we were attacked by marauders on the way. Queen Ampera talked to me too. Thanks for keeping me in the loop, though. At that moment, one of them flew down from the perches and landed in front of me. Jake, Ralph said, as she flapped her wings excitedly. You're back. How are you feeling? Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, I said. One by one, the rest of the team flew down and said hi. They all asked how I was feeling. Apparently, Suma told them that I'd spent a few days recovering after the attack, and that's why I stayed in the city longer than Suma. We gathered around the pit and watched the matches. At the moment, one of the other squad's lieutenants was training with her team with the monk battles, a regular form of training for us in the last few weeks. Jake, about the rune experimentation you mentioned, do you plan on continuing on base? Sima asked. Yeah, but I need to get permission and a professional teacher, or maybe babysit me, I said. You have an interest in runes, Odin said. I knew you had some of your garments and weapons, but I didn't know you enjoyed crafting them. I just started. It's new. Is that not rather expensive? How do you afford it? Nine asked. I used to sell paper, so I've got plenty of gold coins and spare dull jar. You sold paper? Odin asked, shocked. Do you have any now? No. Sorry, I used to carry some, but I don't anymore. My backpack weighed too much when it was full of paper. I wish I'd kept some, though, I said sadly. Those scraps of leather weren't enough, and writing a letter to my mum without paper would be really hard anyway. I heard that Captain Gigolus got a shipment of paper recently, Rao said. What, when? Well, you were gone, she answered. Do you know where he is right now? I asked, urgently. If I have paper, probably his room, Nine suggested. Suma, would you mind going there and summoning me? I really need to talk with him, I said. Right now? I suppose I do not mind, Suma said. I thanked her, and she flew away. Are you going to ask for some paper? Nine wondered. Yeah, I just need one piece. End of book. We'll pick the story up again when Book 3 is mostly finished and released, and my schedule allows it. I hope you all enjoyed. Cheers. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and patrons. Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Bushmaster177, Lord Azrakal, AmbroseKTal, Quantum Wednesday, Dragzoon W.R.E, and Blueberry Cat. Thank you very much for the support. It is super appreciated.